I clicked record.
Nice.
Okay. Can you see this that I'm sharing?
Yeah.
I'll
All
just shut
good.
that down then. Okay. Let me just open up. Oh my god, there's so many chords here.
Oh, we're live. Wow.
Wow.
Do you want some kind of sign for when I have to switch to the next one, or should I? I mean, it should be okay.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
We already have viewers.
Yeah.
Okay, the notification on Discord is up.
Yay.
Nice.
Butter's here.
Hi, Butter.
Butter.
Okay, so we give people 5 minutes to join.
Yeah, we're just gonna hang out a bit
Yes.
so everyone can join. Prepare our muscles in our face for excessive talking.
Oh, I recognize Cat in the chat.
Hello.
Hello.
You can come over here to project your beautiful voice in my professional microphone.
See much. I'm bringing the computer.
It should survive for like 5 minutes.
I'm sure. Oh, stay here. Hello, guys. So we're giving everyone like about 5 minutes to join the chat and join the stream. The notification on Discord have just gone up, so we're just giving people a fair chance to join in. Until then, you can say hi in the chat, and we will say hi to you guys too. Thank you for everyone who came in early so far. It's nice to see so many people already.
The way people will think that I have two different voices. It's just my two different
I'm definitely
personalities.
Madamka.
Yeah.
Such good voice acting.
Right? Yeah, it's I just switch between my two voices. It's like when I want to hype up the chat, then I start talking like this.
No.
I'm suddenly an entirely different person.
Yeah, we have split personalities here.
It's so I can cover more bases, you know? More people can relate to me because I'm more than one people. Hey, Derpsy.
Hey, hello, Dipsy.
A lot of familiar faces in chat.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
So sweet.
Yeah. I'm looking at chat and I'm like, I know these comics. I don't know how long we want to wait. We will still have a couple more minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's been.
Yeah, I'll look at
How's everyone doing? Are you guys working on episodes as usual? Oh, first series. Wow. Good luck with launching.
Yeah, that's very cool. Good luck.
Yeah. I hope that this will be helpful. I would advise to write some stuff down. Or well, you can always watch it back afterwards, but it probably helps you if you if you take notes. The suffering for today. We have been up for a while now because it's actually 8 p.m. over here. It's very it's getting late for us.
Just a little bit.
Just a tad bit. It's okay. We're just gonna talk for like 2 hours and then collapse into bed.
Okay, I think the participant number is kind of still, so you guys can just slowly introduce each yourselves, and then just introduce
Yeah.
the panel or workshop. And by the time you start the workshop, everyone who wanted to join in, they have already come.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll leave the stage to you guys.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
Lucy.
Luxie.
Um,
Hmm.
Mm.
Okay. Well, so I'm Madamka. Hi. And I'm here with Soya.
Hello.
And we're gonna hopefully help you guys figure out how to build your Patreon specifically around your webcomic. It's gonna be a very long panel, I think, because we have a lot of stuff to cover, and we can't even promise to go into full detail on everything because Patreon is a huge beast, honestly. But we will try our best to go through every single like important point and tell you guys about what we learned in the years that we've been doing this. And to make it a bit more streamlined, we will give you a timeline first about what we're gonna cover. And you can always reference what you see on the screen. Soya is the one who prepared this for us and is like doing the magic behind the scenes to help us stay on track so we don't go into side tangents all the time.
I'll try.
Um, but yeah, you can see on the timeline now on the screen that we will give you some tips in preparation, and then we will cover rewards, tiers and pricing, about me page specifically, and then general tips for running the Patreon after you set it up, marketing it and promoting it, and then we will have some random tips and tricks at the end that we couldn't really like give put into a separate section, but we just wanted to share it with you guys. And then at the end we will have a Q&A section. So if you're listening to the workshop and something isn't clear, or it prompts a question in your head, don't worry about it, put it in the chat. Luxie is helping us keep track of everything, and we will try to answer it at the very end.
Yay. Okay. So, first of all, if I could speak English, um, I'm Soya, and I make Susuhara as a Demon currently. I have two other completed works. It stems from Love and Galaxy Stop. I've been doing comics for 4 years. I did some other comics before that, but I don't really count it. So my Patreon has also been up for, I think it's like 2 years old, 3 years old, something like that. Because I started it a little later in my comic process. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm the creator of Diamond Dive, a fantasy GL comic, and my entire Patreon is built around it. I also worked on the short story contest entry. Her name was Sunny, which is a one shot. And I've been running Patreon since before I started webcomics, but back then it was really just a tip jar. So for me, it wasn't like I didn't set up Patreon at first for Webtoon, but then I had to like reorganize it, and that's when it really took off when it got like an actual frame to work with. So there's my credentials. Been running Patreon for quite some time.
Yeah, I feel like it's very like um I don't know, like maybe like usual for people that when they set up a Patreon first and then they're not sure how to like what rewards to do or what to do with it, it's like, well, I'll just put up a tip jar. I did the same.
Yeah, yeah.
When I first started a Patreon, it was just like $1 tip jar, and the
Yeah.
About Me page was like, "Hi,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do, so
Yeah,
you
and
go."
like I would post like the files for my drawings, and it's like, who do you post that for? Because like most of your patrons are not fellow artists. So it was like, it was a mess. I barely posted anything because it felt awkward because there weren't a lot of people there. So it was just like, I
Yeah.
shouldn't be posting. But yeah,
Well, we're
uh,
doing better now. Like
yeah, we're
we
doing
we got
better now.
more confident in our posting.
This is just to tell you guys that like if you feel like you're not cut out for this, neither was I. But here I am.
Yeah, it's not like we started like, "Oh, I just know how to do bam 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 bam."
Yeah,
No.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, a few preparation tips. Um, both of us have a mock-up document, which I usually created in Google Drive because it's free. But any kind of document program or note taking, whatever you prefer, for doing notes about how to set up your Patreon page, how you want to name the tiers, what you want to put in the description, and so on. All of the information that I have about planning and ideas, anything like that, goes into that document. And every time you want to change your Patreon, you can go back and refer to that document and change that around before you like launch the changes on the Patreon page itself. So you have a very clear overview of what you're planning. It
Yeah,
helps a lot.
and also it gives you that safety net of like maybe you have this like new idea for your tier description and you try it out and then you realize that like it's actually a bit more confusing than the previous one. It's nice if you still have the previous one saved, tagged away, like tucked away in like a nice document so you can always go back, and change it back to the previous one. So that's our first tip, that like whatever you learn in this workshop, always remember that it's okay to change stuff because your Patreon should change and evolve with you and your work, but just don't be destructive with it. Keep a copy of previous versions so you can always edit it and change it back and forth to whatever fits your narrative at that time.
Yeah.
And then also, like, for in general, you will hear us talk about this several times in the workshop, but you need to treat your Patreon as like the whole package. You need to think about what do people see when they first enter your Patreon, when they first decide to even check it out. It's like an in real life shop that the branding on the outside should be clear for what they should expect on the inside. So try to think of it as like not just a tip jar or like not just one page, but like you need to think about all of the different aspects. And by that we mean the about me section, the tier description, the pictures that you use, all of it goes together. And like the last point says, think about the branding, so make it like look cohesive, but don't be afraid to edit when necessary.
Yeah, we'll go a little bit into branding specifically later on in the marketing section, just in case people were
Yeah.
confused by what we mean with branding. But yeah, really, don't be afraid to make edits to whatever you write down or whatever stuff you do to your Patreon. It's an ever growing thing.
Yeah. And these are just thoughts that we wanted to give to all of you before we jump into it, because it's going to be an overarching theme in what we say, that like
Yeah.
you need templates, you need to be able to edit your things and look it through and check the previous versions. And also, you need to make sure that your branding and your marketing and your Patreon is consistent.
Yeah. So to start off with setting up the Patreon itself, um, well, first thing is rewards, because that's the first thing that people will see when they go to your Patreon. And it's actually also the only thing I think people will see if they are reading your Webtoon episode and they click become a Patreon on their phone.
Yeah.
it will actually log them into a version of the Patreon website that only show your tiers, so the rewards.
Yeah.
So yeah, things to offer. We will have a little list after the slide actually, where we have a couple of examples of things you can offer. Generally, I would say that you should prioritize having digital rewards over physical rewards because physical rewards are expensive and it's very confusing. It can become very overwhelming quickly because of taxes and shipping, um, like what's it called? What shipping costs? Shipping costs, yeah. so so it's just in general, I think especially if you're just starting out, I would not do physical rewards before you are much more comfortable running your Patreon. And honestly, even when you are, you really don't have to do physical rewards unless you really, really find a way that works for you, because it works completely fine without. Um, it's good to have rewards that is things that you already do. So, for example, the comic, that your Patreon is about. Um, Work in progress shots. You're already working on the comic, so taking a screenshot of the sketching progress or the line art stage or whatever you prefer, that is a good reward in itself. Early access is a very common reward as well. So things like that, just as many things within reason, of course, but it's good to think about what kind of things can you reuse or use from what you're already working on, and what do you have the time for. You don't need to be telling your Patreons or promising them a bunch of things that you actually don't have the time to do.
Yeah. And also, especially when you're starting out, right? You sat down and you decided that, okay, you're going to do this Patreon thing, you're going to jump into it. The first thing you need to brainstorm, of course, is the rewards. What can I offer? What can I offer on a monthly basis? Because that's an important difference. Like, you shouldn't make promises that you can't keep because hopefully people are gonna be paying for this, so you want to give them what they paid for. And a thing that you have to keep in mind is that it's always way more easy to add rewards later on if you feel like, oh, I get the groove of this, I can do a little bit more, because people are always happy to receive something new. Taking away is less easy. It's not impossible. You can always sunset rewards, but it requires communication. You have to explain it to your patrons and everything. So when you first set up, try not to overdo it. Try to think about it. Sit down with a piece of paper or a document and just brainstorm whatever reward comes to your mind. Like, write it all down, but then try to edit it. Like, from all of those ideas, what is realistic? What do you have time for? What is a type of reward that you can just reuse from your comic, like Soya mentioned before? Like, obviously, like a very easy to do one is the comic itself as early access, that you just give them one more episode as a reward. Another thing can be that you edit panels from your comic into wallpapers. But for that, you have to make the panel itself in a big enough resolution that you're able to reuse it again for your Patreon. So these are all the things that require planning beforehand. So that's why we were saying that, like, you need to sit down and plan for it. So it's not like you just said that, like, oh, I'm gonna do like wallpapers from the comic, and then you realize when the Patreon is already running that your panels are actually not big enough for that, for example.
Yeah. Also, it's just good to keep in mind, like, what is, when you have this list of ideas, then which of these rewards would actually be interesting for a patron
Yeah.
and not just interesting to you as a creator? Because we as comic artists are trying to, we're marketing to readers, we're not marketing to other creators, unless you make a comic about comic tips. Um, so So yeah, think about if you were a reader who was a fan of your comic or a reader of your comic or another comic. Think about the comics that you really enjoy. If they had a Patreon, what would you like from them? Like, is it monthly art? Would it be early access? Whatever it is, think about it from a reader's point of view.
Also, another thing to keep in mind that there are certain rewards that are a very good idea to run for a while. And then when it like overstayed its welcome, you need to sunset it. And I have a personal like example for that. I have step-by-step shots on my Patreon as a reward, which was a very like loved reward when I first launched it, but it kind of becomes repetitive slowly, you know? Like, there's only so many ways you can show your own process on pages because we're on weekly or monthly schedules. We're doing the same thing over and over again, you know? Like, the page is still gonna have the same template and setup and everything else like that. So I could see that, like, slowly the engagement on that reward is going a little bit down. It's not like people hate it, but you know, after a while, it's just not worth the time that it takes for me to set up those step by step shots for the engagement that it gets instead. So recently, I told my patrons that, like, hey guys, I'm gonna make some changes. I'm sunsetting a few rewards and instead I'm introducing new things because the time that I was spending on this reward that's not really interesting to people anymore, I could be spending on that on the comic itself.
Yeah.
So that's also something to keep in mind that, like, it's okay if a reward is not interesting anymore. You just need to keep an eye on it. And if you feel like, yeah, it did what it could, but it's not really worth it anymore, then sunset it, discontinue it, come up with something else. It's okay.
Yeah, honestly, I think that keeping it as simple as possible is good. And also quality over quantity, you know? It
Yes,
doesn't have to
definitely.
be like your tiers doesn't have to have like 10 rewards per tier. Um, it's okay if it's just one new reward per tier.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, definitely.
examples of rewards you can have is early access. People can read ahead a week or, well, an update or several updates. They are usually a very popular type of reward because if people are interested in the main comic, they will hopefully want to know what's happening next.
Yeah,
And work in progress, also a good reward that you are already doing. Exclusive illustrations, I do that on my Patreon. It's once a month that I do a new exclusive illustration that I share with my $5 patrons. And that one is also, yeah, I mean, if you have the time to do an extra reward like this, I'm pretty packed in my comic making schedule. So this is one of the, I think this is the only thing so far that I have time to do that is like actually a
time
Patreon,
consuming.
yeah, like a time consuming Patreon focused reward that I wasn't already
Yeah.
doing with my comic. And it's okay because I enjoy it, which is important that it has to be something you enjoy. Um,
And then another version would be what I specialize in, which is not safe for work art. So on my Patreon, I will soon have early access that you see on the list, and I do the work in progress shots, of course. I don't have exclusive illustrations. I only do new illustrations for my comic if it's either like an anniversary of the comic or if I just want new marketing or promoting material, you know? And then I usually just share that on Patreon, but it's not a monthly reoccurring reward. Instead, I have the Not Safe for Work art, which I also advertise on my episodes. And later in the workshop, I will talk about how to do that while still keeping in mind the TOS of Webtoon and how to not get flagged, hopefully, for your advertisement. Um, and then for the bonus comic points, Soya and I are pretty good examples of the two version because Soya does bonus comics that are safe for work, that are related to her comics, which is I think it's a great reward because if people are already interested in your comic, then they're gonna be interested to see like a little bit more of their life. You know, if they already love your characters or your world, if it's more like world building heavy, they will want to see more, you know? So you can always let them know that, like, if you're interested to see short comics from them, you can find it on my Patreon. And then with Not Safe for Work comics, I'm gonna be launching them next month on my Patreon, and I'm trying to make it like as engaging for my patrons as possible. I come up with different short stories, Not Safe for Work short stories based on my comic, and then I let them choose which scenario would they like to see first, which outfit do they like, all that, you know, because it's not the main comic. Like, obviously, with the main comic, you want to be the one who calls the shots. You are the one who decides on the outfits and all that because it matters in the canon world of the comic. But with extra comics, it's a good chance to involve your patrons a little bit more, even with just outfit choices and stuff. So I think that's something that you should all keep in mind as a reward because it's very popular with
Yeah.
patrons.
Also, if this sounds like, I don't know, if you're like, oh, it would be fun to do monthly art and then also bonus comics, but I don't think I would have the time for both. The way that it works for both of us, in the sense that the way it works for me right now and the way it's going to work for Madamka,
Yeah.
um, is that like we have like an either or thing. So for
Yeah.
me, it's like they either get a monthly illustration or they get a bonus comic. And for Madame Kids, the same, that they either get the monthly Not Safe for Work art or they will get pages of the bonus Not Safe for Work comic that
Yeah.
she's working on.
Yeah.
So it
Because I
doesn't,
don't have the time for both. And you have to be clear about that. Like, you have to keep the expectations realistic and be like, hey guys, I can do either this or that 1 month, you know?
yeah. And it's okay because it's, you know, these are both art rewards. So it's not like they're completely unrelated to each other. It's not like you either get a monthly illustration or you get early access, in that kind of sense, if you get me.
Yeah. They
So so yeah, stuff like that can work out as well. And it's just to mention like there are ways to go around rewards that if you want another reward, but you don't have time to do it all the time, then this is a way for you to do it. And then the last on the list is PDFs. Of course, there's more rewards you can do than this. This is just a short idea list for you. There's a lot of people that do PDFs of their comic or of their bonus comics or a PDF collection of exclusive art and so on. I used to do chapter PDFs when I ran my previous comic, It Stems from Love. And yeah, I've seen a lot of comic Patreons that do like a roundup PDF of different rewards, honestly. So it's just an
Yeah.
idea for you.
Yeah. It's also a good idea that, like, for example, let's say that you're running illustrations as a reward for like a year, and then you would like to like sunset that reward because you don't have the time anymore to do exclusive illustrations. A very like useful way or like handy way for your patrons to just access all of the past rewards that you're not going to do anymore is to compile them in a PDF and just link it in a pinned post, which we will talk about later, that you should do that. Um, and just have it there that like all of the illustrations I did last year are available to download in a PDF if you just want to browse through it as if it was a zine, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So this brings us to our next point, tiers and pricing. Because you have to set up the tiers now that you have the ideas about what kind of rewards you would like and where should you place the rewards and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what kind of price should it be at? To start off, this is an example of my $5 tier. You should always place the rewards in order of importance.
Yeah.
So the most important and interesting reward goes on the top of the list, and preferably bolded. So, for example, for my $5 tier, it's monthly exclusive illustration or a bonus comic. And then I have my downloadable archive of past illustrations. And then you can see I have HD panels and some PDF downloads of chapters. And so, yeah, it's good to kind of like, if you can, try to bolden and bring focus to the, for each tier that you have, the new reward for that tier always at the top. Like, don't do, like, let's say you have 3 tiers, right? So you have a $2 tier, you have a $5 tier, and a $10 tier. And in $2 it's early access, and $5 it's art, and then $10 not safe for work, let's say. You don't want to then start out like on $2, it's just gonna say early access, and then $5, you don't have to write early access again if you want to include lower tier rewards. But then you can see at the bottom here on mine, it says all lower tier rewards included, but that's at the very bottom. It shouldn't be at the top, because then, yeah, it's a little, it's not
Or
as
even
important, basically.
or even if it's on the top, then don't list all of the previous rewards because it just takes up space. Just say all lower tier rewards included. So even
Yeah.
if you're starting out with it, just make sure that it's just a shortened one sentence. And also, like in general, you can see on this screenshot, it's a pretty good example. You have a flavor text on top, which is like a short little like teaser or flavor text, and then you have the rewards. And that's it. You don't have to write a lot in the beginning. Just keep it short and sweet and to the point so that they understand what they are getting for their money in that tier.
Yeah. The reason as well that I generally prefer to have something like lower tier rewards included at the very bottom is because if you have a longer tier description for whatever reason, whatever tiers that are, sorry, whatever rewards might be listed in it, that makes it longer so that you have to click read more. If the top of that list that's then readable before the read more doesn't actually tell you what the new thing you get in that tier is, it might, like, I don't know, I feel like psychologically it kind of makes you not want to read it.
Mm.
So, but this is not an issue at all times because it only depends on how long the the tier description is, because if it's not that long, then it's not even going to do the read more section. So it's just something to keep in mind, but it's okay to put it at the top if you would prefer it that way, and it's the same for all tiers, but then keep it consistent and then try to have the text short enough that it will still show at least one more reward under it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um yeah, upselling.
Yeah, when you start to think about, okay, I have my rewards and I know what I want to put in tiers and I have like a general idea for these tiers, then try to think about how can you group them together into tiers? Which one should be in a lower tier, a mid tier, and a high tier? Like generally, you can start out with a template like this, and then you can start thinking about the pricing. Patreon themselves says that you should not have a $1 tier because the processing fees and everything that they have to take off of it are so high that it's not really worth it. Like from $1, you don't even get half of that from your patrons
Yeah.
because processing it is just expensive. It's not worth it. Patreon themselves recommends that you start with either $2 or $3. Also, think about inflation and stuff like that. So, yeah, we both have $2 as our lowest tiers because we started way back.
Yeah, you can see
But
Madamka's here.
yeah, if I started today, I would already start with $3, honestly. And then when you think about grouping the rewards together, something to keep in mind is upselling. what is it that you can put in the next tier up that makes it worth it to upgrade to it? Like, I see a lot of patrons where I think the creators are kind of worried that they are not giving enough. And so they pile a lot of rewards in the lowest tier. And then and they are very good rewards as well. And the only thing that they put higher up is like, I don't know, PDF version of the episode, but like past episodes. And like, I get that type of thinking that you want to give a lot to the people who decided to give you money and everything, but you have to make it worth for yourself as well. Like, this is your living, we're talking about your income. So try to think about it as the thing that it is, business. You are trying to earn. So, what is it that you can put in the $2 tier that's a fair content there for the price? And what is it that you can put in $5 to make it worth it for people to be like, actually, I want to pay $3 more because that reward is interesting? And then what is it that you can from there put in $10 that makes them want to pay more, you know? It's not about like, it's not about overworking yourself just because you feel like you're supposed to give more. Try to work smart, and even it out. You have to be respectful towards yourself as well and your work, not just your patrons.
Yeah. Also, with upselling, you kind of think about if you're not sure what upselling means, it's kind of like when you're at the cinema and then you're like, oh, I could really go for a Coke. And then you see that they have like a menu where you can also get a popcorn. Oh, but then it's like a small menu. But if you upgrade it to a medium, it's only like $1 more. So you're
Yeah,
like, it's not really that bad. And I do get a medium. And then you
yeah.
look at the big menu, and then it's only, I don't know, $2 more. I'm just guessing. I'm not American. I'm sorry. Um, but you get the idea that like this is a thing in a lot of stores and a lot of places, honestly, that there is like an upselling point, and you want it to not be a huge gap between the tiers because otherwise it's not going to be worth it to pay that extra amount. So for mine, there's a $3 difference. It's really not that much with how much extra you're getting. And it's different from person to person where they prefer to put their rewards, in the sense that I have early access as my entry point to my Patreon. So I usually I promote my early access, for example. It's the cheapest reward that I have, and it's an interesting reward because people want to read ahead on the comic. So hopefully they will go to the Patreon to get early access, and then they see that, oh, actually, for $5, which is only $3 more than the early access, I can also get exclusive monthly art, and I can get bonus comics, and I can get the archive of that art. And don't worry about, by the way, if you are considering doing monthly exclusive art, don't worry about not having a backlog in the start because it will come the more that you're running your Patreon. So
Hmm.
it comes over time, and that's cool. It becomes an add-on selling point. But if you don't, like, you're obviously not starting out with 50 drawings backlog. And if you have 50 drawings of backlog, then don't post all 50 of them at once because buffer is important.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this is how the upselling on, for example, from my $2 to my $5 tier works, and it's, you can see on Madamka's tiers as well that she has like preview shots and HD panels as the $2 reward, and then in $5 it's not safe for work, but it's a sketch, so it's grayscale. And then in the $10, which is only $5 more, you get a fully colored, not safe for work illustration. So this follows this model of like, oh, for like $3 more I could get not safe for work art. It's only
Yeah.
$3, and then like, oh, $5 more I could get even more not safe for work art because they still get all the other rewards of the previous
Yeah.
tiers.
That's an important thing to keep in mind. Like if you feel like oh my $10 tier is like overpriced because I only have one more thing to offer, that's not overpriced. They are already receiving everything that was in the previous tiers. That is packed. So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if I actually got to mention this because my memory is a little wacky sometimes. But in terms of like where you want to put your rewards, I have exclusive art in $5 and I have early access in 2. But there are some people that have, because they either have longer episodes or they post more frequently or they just would prefer to have it at a higher tier, that early access is actually in something like $5 or $10. I've seen that as well.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's also because the early access is like several episodes ahead. So just think about what you would like to, like, what would be the entry point for your Patreon, and then it's easier for you to put together where the rewards should go in the other tiers.
Yeah. And if you're not sure how you want to do it, because I know that it might come across as like, well, it's easy for you guys to talk about it. You already figured it out. How am I supposed to figure out on my own what price tag I should put on my rewards? Go and stalk other creators' Patreon.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's what we did as well. Like, you just go around, look at different creators. Graphtreon.com is your friend.
Yeah, just cross
Look
reference.
yeah, cross reference. Look at other people's Patreon. Look at something that you feel like, oh, yeah, I see this as like a fair pricing, and then apply it to your own work.
Yeah, it's very good to do market research because there's you can learn so much from other creators,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
So yes.
Oh, yeah. The final tip we have for tiers in general is to just have a generosity tier. I've been doing this since I started my comic, and ever since then, I've been like pushing all of my creator friends to follow it and do it as well. Whatever is your highest tier that has rewards in it, like mine is $10, do another tier that's double that, and it clearly says that this is just for people if they want to be generous. Because I know that some people are it's a little weird to set it up at first that like I'm just asking for more money and I don't give them anything. But trust me, you have readers out there who want to support you and want to be generous because they love your work and they just want to see you succeed. And if they have the means to help you, then let them. And also, a lot of people who use Patreon don't know that they can edit their pledge. So if you don't have a higher tier, they think that they can't give you more, even if they want to. So it takes no time to set up another tier. It's no effort on your end because you don't have to give them any extra reward. So just let them support you more if they want to. Worst case scenario, no one subscribes to it, but even then, you didn't lose anything because you're not creating extra rewards for it. It's just there. It's
Yeah.
free for you, and they have the option to help you.
And they still get access to your other rewards, so it's not like
Yeah.
they're signing up to just do nothing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. When I first set up this tier, I was prepared for it to be empty for months, and that would have been fine. But honestly, I had readers sign up to it immediately. They are super sweet and they just want to be there for the creators that they like. So it's worth it. Just set up a generosity tier. Eventually, someone will use it and it will be nice.
Yeah. Okay, we have a bit about the description in the tier. I made a version of my $2 tier where the text is very, very long. Because as you can see in, I think actually, yeah, I have another slide here. This is actually how long the text is. So the thing is that flavor text is fine to have, but it really, it doesn't have to be that long. You can keep it like short and sweet, because it is just flavor text. So it doesn't tell you what you're gonna get, which is why they're on your Patreon to see what they will get for their money. So here I wrote, for example, welcome to Now Student Loan Club. We're so excited to have you here as an honorary member and hope you enjoy your stay. Here's the super cool rewards you get in this tier. But because the flavor text is so long, you can see that the read more or the show more barely shows the first reward in the tier. And in the shorter version of my tier, then there's not even a show more button. And it's not that it's a problem, by the way, if you end up with a tier that has show more, because sometimes that's just the case, because there's a lot of rewards in the tier. But people should be able to see, even in this little preview part, they should be able to see at least one or two of the rewards that they can get, so they want to read the rest of it. And so the same thing goes for when you are describing what people are going to get for their reward. Early access, you can just write early access to insert comic name, or write read ahead or read X amount of episodes ahead of comic name. You don't have to explain. For example, here I put in this is like it updates every other week. It doesn't have to be super detailed in that sense. It needs to give enough detail, like it has to be informative. Here, for example, it says early access to Susuhara as a demon episodes. They know what early access is, hopefully. So, so then they will know that, like, oh, I can read ahead. And assumingly, one episode. If you have multiple episodes, I would suggest that you write, like, read 3 episodes ahead, or, early access to 3 episodes ahead, whatever way you want to word it. But you don't have to make it super long. It's the same for the work in progress shot. You can just write access to work in progress. You don't have to explain what work in progress is, because people know what it means. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're doing reward description. Informative but short, basically.
You should try to avoid basically a wall of text. Like everyone knows the expression too long didn't read. That's what people are gonna feel. Like they open up your Patreon, they are already interested, right? They are willing to check out if they want to subscribe to your content. And then instead of getting a handy, short, nice list of like, bam, 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 here's what you get, here's your rewards. Instead of that, they have to do the whole mental gymnastics of reading through a novel. That's not what they are here for. Like, it doesn't have to be a diary entry. Just keep it short and informative. And also try to take the time to format it in a way that's easy to consume visually. You can see on this example screenshot, the flavor text is like italicized, and it has the emojis on the side of it to make it pop a little bit, and then you have the bullet point list. Very easy to look at, very easy to see where one reward ends and it's the description for the next one. Whereas in the previous slide, if you look at it, it just all looks like it's a not never ending text vomit. It's just too much. It's okay that you're trying to tell them everything, but there's no need to, because there's a welcome note that you can also write for your patrons, which we're gonna talk about later on,
Yeah.
where you can go into more detail. So even if you want to say some stuff that like, oh, the comic updates every other week. Usually you're going to be one episode ahead, maybe more. You can put this information in the welcome note.
Yeah, or
When
the
they are
about
just
me
checking,
section.
yeah, when they are just checking out your tiers, there's no need to go into too much detail.
Yeah,
Just keep it simple.
because it's not like like a recipe website where you need to put a very long story before the actual recipe for SEO purposes, because you don't need SEO for a Patreon page. Like, you're not depending on people googling your Patreon page. You should be the one putting it in front of them.
Yeah.
So tier pictures and names, they are also a way that you can kind of add a little flavor to your Patreon and to the overall look and feel of it. there's very different ways of doing it. Patreon also has animated tier pictures if you like that kind of stuff. So the way that Madamka does it, as you can see to the left, is that she drew these like cute little thumbnails of like an idea about what you will get, and it adds up the more tiers, like, or sorry, it adds up for each tier. So you can see that the previous rewards from the other tiers are still going to be in the $10 tier, but then there's like a new shiny thing. My tiers and the pictures are, they're based around the characters. So because my comic is like rom-com and I want to keep it kind of like spunky and cute, then it's kind of like clubs and gangs, because I have delinquent girls and I have like good girls that go to school. So the $5 tier here, for example, is my delinquent bad girl who then has like a lone wolf gang that you then sign up to. So it's just extra flavor for your patrons, honestly.
Yeah, it's not like there's one way better than the other to do it. My picture is trying to give you an example of like how many different rewards you can get, and then Soya's is based on the character that they like. And then I would like to also note that when it comes to tier names, it's not like tier names are important in the sense that they don't really play a big part in your Patreon, but I would share a tip that I only like learned in my last year, really, and that was that simple tier names will help you later on when you have to communicate with your patrons about changes. I'm going to be changing up my Patreon in this coming month, and because of that, I had to talk about what changes in the tiers respect like separately. I had to talk to my patrons about it. So every single time I have to explain to them that like I'm moving reward A from tier A to tier B. I have to say the name of the tier, and I have really long tier names. So I'm changing them now. I've learned my lesson. Like it's cute that this one is called On That Lewd Kind of Magic, and then I have one that's like Advanced Incantations. It's cute and everything, but when you have to put it into text all the time because you're explaining changes, you're gonna start to go mad from it. So now that I'm redoing my Patreon, I'm changing my tiers to Witch, Demon, Archive. That's it. One word. Goodbye. We're not doing this anymore. So that's just my personal tip for y'all. Keep it simple. Keep it simple.
Yeah, I got the reason that I still have long names is because I think that they're fun. Like, because they're
Yeah.
not super super long.
Yeah.
And like I usually just refer to them as the $5 tier or the $2 tier, because usually people know how much they're paying, or what kind of tier they're in. But I do get your feeling with it of like, hey everyone, I'm moving stuff from beepity boop bop bop to popcorn and rice and everything great. It's like, oh
Yes.
god. That's really long. And usually when you're doing notices for your Patreons, those are very long anyways. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I completely get that.
Yep. And to also repeat ourselves from our preparation tips, for notices as well, write them in a Word document first. You're going to be very thankful that you don't have to edit that note in Patreon's editing system and interface. Write it in a Word document so you can cut things out, change the order comfortably, and then when you're set, then copy paste it into Patreon because it's just going to make your life easier.
So next we have the About Me page. And then I'm gonna try to see if I can figure out how to open it for you all. There we go. Hopefully you can see this
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, it's showing up. Yes, I have
on
just
the
checked
stream.
it on Twitch. Yes.
Okay, cool. So, About Me page. There's different ways to do it, but in general, then, people don't, uh, well, they will probably know about you if they went to your Patreon because they should have found your Patreon through you. But
Mm-hmm.
still, it's okay to, like, start out with a little introduction, um, talk about your works, and, maybe this is also where you can mention, you can see here,
Everything,
you can,
everything you do.
yeah, basically, you can mention how often you update, what are the works you have. Um, the way that my Patreon is paused right now, so that's why this is at the top, but don't mind it. Usually it's just the same text but without this. So, for example, in mine, I have an introduction of who I am and what I create, and then I do a little like summary text. Um, I think it's also really nice to have pictures in your About Me section because you are a comic artist, It helps to like you are at the rewards and they have like a bunch of pictures. So then when they
Mm-hmm.
go on the About Me
Mm-hmm.
section to kind of help break up the text as well so it's easier to read, then it's nice to have pictures in between. That's just my opinion at least.
Yeah,
Because I have short
yeah.
attention span. So
Me too.
so yeah, you can start out with like a short sweet introduction and then talk about the current work that you're doing. If it's multiple, then mention them. If it's just one, like for example, I am only running one right now, then I just have the little summary, a picture of the girls, and then I would suggest to do a list of what they get um, as Patreons. And you might notice that this list is like slightly different looking than the tiers. I still put the most important things at the top. They are a little more detailed, and you can also hyperlink if you want and stuff like that. But yeah, I sometimes go a little more into detail here when I list the rewards, and also I don't list them per tier because I'm just doing this assuming that it's every single reward they can get. So that if people are interested in, like, oh, monthly illustration, that sounds pretty cool, or bonus comics, that sounds pretty cool, then they can go up and like reference here where it is they would get that.
Yeah.
So, and then at the very bottom, I have where to find your rewards, because I'm a little bad and I didn't do a pinned post yet, even though I should. So don't be like me. but but you can. I still think though that having your rewards listed as like where you can find them, I think it's fine to have it in the About Me section, but I would also have a pinned post for your actual patrons because it's not as easy for them to find your About Me section as soon as they are patrons. But I have free wallpapers and stuff, so I want even people that just come here to get those free wallpapers to be able to access them. Um,
Yeah.
and then it's just a little like, if you don't have the funds for Patreon, that's cool, you can share the comic, and that's also really nice. And then I list um, my previous works. This is hyperlinks through the banners, and then a little flavor text at the end.
Yeah. The overall things to keep in mind when you're doing your About Me page or bio, however you want to call it, is that people don't necessarily know you, especially if they are coming from your Webtoon, right? Because that's what this whole workshop is about, building your Patreon or surrounding your Webtoon. So try to imagine how a person gets to this page, right? They see your webcomic on Webtoon. They click on it. They see that there's a button there to become a patron. They click on it. The first thing they will see is the tiers. So that's why we started with that, like how that should be formatted. But if they don't know you from other social media, they might think, oh, I want to check out who this person is. So you need to write this About Me page, assuming that this person doesn't know you. They don't know where to find your other stuff. They don't know how long you've been doing this or what you're offering in general. So this is your chance to give a professional introduction of yourself. It's not supposed to be a diary entry or an afterthought. It is your chance to give them all the links and all the information that they need. Keep it positive, add visual interest, like Soya said, add links so they can easily access your other stuff, social media links, the comics on different platforms, if you mirror somewhere, or if you have your own website for having it, and then have the handy write up of perks of becoming a patron. This is the chance that you have to like add a bit more flavor, a bit more text to make it look like, it's more a natural conversation kind of compared to the tiers, which are supposed to be a short list. And then at the end, you can have a little bit more of like a personal addition. Like I took the time here, for example, to talk about how every little counts. So even if they feel like $2 is not a lot, I appreciate it a lot because it helps me. And if you can't join the Patreon squad, that's okay. And then I give them ideas of how to support the comic instead. And then you thank them for being here, and you just say goodbye. Also, with the pictures, for example, I wanted to mention this, that like this is going back to us saying to all of you to go and learn from other creators, and if you learned something, try to pay it forward and teach it to someone else. We were originally with Soya, we were putting in pictures using Patreon's own like option for uploading pictures, but that one works a little weird.
It's
So
very
it
bad.
wasn't, it's really bad. It wasn't in the middle, we had to like mess around with the sizing. It was just uncomfortable. And then we learned it from Venny, right? We
Yeah.
learned it from Venny. And then we learned it from a fellow creator, Venny Mortem, that she had this galaxy brain idea that she uploads the picture to a Discord server, a private one that she made for herself, and then she copies the URL from there and just paste it in here. And it works, and it's perfect. It sizes perfectly. It is a godsend.
Yeah.
So this is what we mean when we say to learn from each other, because you can't know everything. And it's very, very nice to learn things from each other and then pay it forward and give it back to the community and tell others about it.
Yeah. Also, I want to add with this About Me section that uh, on Madamka's, there's actually a very good example of like this part where you are listing the rewards, that it doesn't have to be in the order of how the tiers are.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You are doing it here in the order of what is most important. And for Madamka's Patreon, that's her not safe for work art. So she
Yeah.
puts that at the very top, even though it's her third tier, because this is like what she promotes the most, and it is the reward that brings the most people. It's a very popular one, and so then after that comes other rewards, but it is still, you always do this like most important at the top. For Madame K, it's not safe for work, and for mine, it's the early access, and then the monthly art. So yeah, let me see if I can switch it back. Doop.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you can all see the PowerPoint again.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So next up is, okay, you got it all set up, and then how do I run my Patreon, because I have to do that.
Yep. What are the things to keep in mind about how to run it on the long run? Um, the schedule, things to keep in mind, the organizing your posts. The first like thing that you have to keep in mind is that you need to make sure that your Patreon is easy to use. Like, just between us, Patreon can be a little bit clunky sometimes. Not everything is easy to access on PC, and not everything is easy to access on mobile. So you have to double check what your posts look like on PC or on mobile app, and how easy it is for your patrons to find it. And with that, we come to a pinned post. Create a post where you link everything you can and put it together for your patrons and then pin it at the top. If I were you, I would put in a picture that grabs the attention, like in the screenshot, that it's like clearly about the rewards, and then have a menu. I try to have my menu be set up in a way where like you can click on all of the rewards for a separate tier, or you can click just on a link for one reward at a time. And then on the bottom, you can also browse by series, because whenever I post, no matter what it is, I always tag what series is it for and what reward it is. I have ongoing tags for every single reward I do. So the tags on Patreon are a lot more for ease of access. They are not like Tumblr hashtags where you can just write whatever, you know? You can do that too, of course, for jokes, but you should still have the actual tags that are there for organizing. So for illustrations, always tag it illustrations, because then you can create a link to it and put it in a pinned post, and it's going to be easy for people to find it. Also, if they know how to use Patreon, then on the top they can browse by tags and
Yeah.
they can just click on it, and it's going to be easy for everyone. So have a pinned post, have a tagging system figured out, write it down for yourself or something. I have a post-it note next to my desk on the wall that has all of my tags, so I don't forget what I used before and that I have to use them, you know? Make sure that you make the posts comfortable for both PC and mobile. This is most important, I think, when you're posting image galleries, for example, or early access. Like, for example, Soya does a really good job of slicing up her episodes. So for mobile app users, they can just go through the different slices and read the episode. But then she also posts the long version in the text box, just pastes it in there, because that's better for PC, because they can just scroll down on it, you know?
Yeah.
So stuff like this is important.
Yeah, I want to quickly add with the tag system as well that you can actually see it here on like this is a normal post, right? So there is like well, if this thing would disappear, there are tags at the bottom here, and when you have um, when you are making the post and you're going to write in the tags themselves, Patreon will remember what tags you have made in the past, so it will suggest it to you. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have a longer tag name like early access, you don't have to type out early access every single time. You can just write like E, and then it will suggest early access to you. So, and yeah, like Madamka was saying, um, this is how I do my early access. I prefer to have a little preview image at the top so that when people are scrolling through the Patreon page, then it's not like a huge panel that's taking up half of the page. It's
Yeah.
just a little post that they can easily look at, like, oh, this was episode 72, you know. And for mobile readers, this is sliced by the image gallery is sliced by panel, right? And then, like she said, the long scroll that you can see here. This is just part of it because I can't fit all of it, but this is much easier to read than on PC, and on some phones, the Patreon app can also load this picture so that they can read the scroll fully. But the reason that I do both is that I actually had a phone that was a smartphone, but it could not load the picture in the text part. So I started doing the slicing as well, just to make it easier for everyone. There are
Mm-hmm.
some I've seen some versions of like, or more like, I would suggest to do it something like this way, even if you don't want to slice up it panel by panel, then put the scroll version in the text box.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you upload it in the image gallery, like the full scroll, then people can't, first of all, if they're on a phone, they won't be able to even zoom in enough to read the episode. So then you're already making them like, oh, I can't read it on my phone. Okay, I'll have to go on my PC and open it. And then even when they click on the picture on the PC, they won't be able to zoom in enough. So then they have to open the picture in a new tab and then zoom in on that picture and then read the episode. And you don't want people to have to go through like several different steps just to be able to access their reward, because they already went through the steps of like signing up and putting in their credit card information to access your reward. So you should make it very easy for them to get that reward at that point. So that's
Yes.
why you have this pinned post that tells them this is where you can get everything. And if they don't want to use the pinned post and they just want to scroll through, then make it easy for them. It
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be super difficult. I also personally wouldn't suggest putting the episode as like, because I know that you can do downloadable files. Um, I would not suggest to put the episode as like a downloadable PNG, so that they have to download a picture and then open the picture somewhere and then zoom in on it to read it.
Yeah.
So yeah. And if you're wondering like, well, how can I put the picture into the text box when you are making the text box? Uh, if you if you click inside the text box to like start writing, there will be like a little icon to the left that's a camera. And if you click on that camera, then you can upload a picture.
Yeah.
So that's how
Easy
that
peasy.
works. Yep.
This is a returning thing that we said in the beginning as well, and we were telling you all that we will repeat this a lot. Use templates. Set up a file that has the correct size for this like banner that just says that this is the HD panels for episode 34.5, and then have a text layer and have all the setup behind it that you need. So it's easy to just pop in a new picture, edit the text, and you don't have to do the entire setup every single time. So I have a master file, a Clip Studio file that is called Patreon templates, and I have all of the different template texts saved, and I can just turn on whichever text layer I need, edit it to the current episode, and get a new like header banner image like this done in 3 seconds. Try to work smart, like you don't want to always start from scratch just to make a banner like this for one Patreon post. If you set up everything ahead of time, you will actually save a lot of time on the long run on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it really helps. And also for just the consistency of your patrons' overall
Yeah,
look.
that
Like,
too. It looks sleek.
yeah, my early access, it always has a preview picture at the top. It always says the abbreviation of my comic name and then the episode number. It's not always at the same spot, but it's always this sort of template that's very quick to make. And the
Yeah.
same for Madamka's HD panels. It's always the same text. It's just different pictures, and well, the text
Yeah.
will be slightly different depending on the episode, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very very big help.
Yeah.
Welcome notes. This is what we mentioned a bit earlier in terms of like flavor texting. It's very
Details.
yeah, it's very individual. Like for the person how they like to do welcome notes. Madamka's welcome note is like very short and sweet. It shows you like here's the rewards, welcome, and then here's how you find your rewards, and then there's a hyperlink so they can just click on it. And
Yeah.
she also tells them like what tag they can use if they want to just search by tag.
Yeah.
So it gives the information very quickly, which is very nice. Thanking them for joining the Patreon. And so mine is, it also welcomes you because I am the type of person who likes to make jokes, and my comic itself is like a rom-com. Then I also made the welcome note kind of like a flavor text, in the sense that I have the give yourself a friendly smack on the back or an uncomfortably tender hug. And then I tell them the special privileges they get in the $2 tier, which are like complete bullshit. I mean, it's like if you lose a needle in a haystack, now we'll help you look for it. And for every, like, the way that I set it up is that for every new tier that you go into, this list gets longer the higher the tier is. So for each new tier, there is a new special privilege that is very stupid, because I just want to make people laugh, and I can't not make jokes because it's just a part of my nature.
Yeah.
So, and then at the end, I tell people that they can go to the About Me page and find the tags there. And I should
Yeah.
update this, I will say, to have it the way that Madamka has. But but it's okay because we all start somewhere. Um, but also I don't have that many rewards on my Patreon, so it's not very hard for them to find the rewards that they do need to get, because yeah, I don't post that much. But it would still be nice just for, again, making it easy for your patrons at every step of the way,
Yeah.
making them feel welcome.
Yeah. And in case any of you didn't know because you didn't have a Patreon before, you can just not have welcome notes. That's an option. But you can also choose to have a general welcome note that gets sent out to anyone regardless of tier. But there's an option to customize it based on every tier. And I highly recommend that you do that, that you take the time, because this is a message that your patron will get when they pledge to your Patreon. So it's a nice thing to do, you know? They
Yeah.
just decided to support your work and join your Patreon. And then they get an immediate message from you that, like, hi, welcome. Thank you for pledging to our Patreon. And here's everything you can get. And it's tailored to what tier they pledged to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Patreon
Goals.
goals.
Ah, goals.
Hashtag
Here's
goals.
the thing with goals. Patreon themselves is really like moving further and further away from goals, and you can see it that like every time they update the app and the website, the goals section just gets pushed further and further down
Yeah.
on the creator's page. And it's because a lot of people used it wrong. Like, I think that it's because of that. Because Patreon goals are supposed to be, well, first of all, there are two types of goals that you can set up. One is monetary, so it's an amount, and the other one is community based, so it's how many patrons you will get. You can see that Soya has the monetary one, and I have it based on patrons. And the thing is that you can either make a joke out of it, like I had a goal that is for 100 patrons and it just says damn. And then I had the one for 1,000 that is like, damn, it's just a joke. It's nothing serious. It's just to track that we're getting somewhere. You can celebrate it and stuff like that. Soya actually has goals where she is promising something to the patrons. And that's the big thing. A lot of people use the Patreon goals to set goals for themselves. And that's not what your Patreon goals are supposed to be about. They're supposed to be for something that they get, not you. So, like, in your head as a private person, it's a really nice goal to have that, like, if I reach $2,000, I can hire an assistant or I can buy a new laptop or something. But why is your patron supposed to be hyped about that? They are supposed to be hyped for something that they get, whether it's just a wallpaper or if it's the assistant thing, then word it in a way where they understand that this is good for them. So instead of just being like, I can hire an assistant, then say that I can hire an assistant and we can have more updates, you
Yeah,
know?
or consistent updates.
Or
Yeah.
consistent updates, yeah. You need to word it in a way where your patrons will understand why they should help you reach this goal. Like, what's in it for them?
Yeah.
Or you can just make a joke out of it, like I did.
Yeah, I really don't think like, because like Madamka said that they are moving Patreon goals further and further down. And also I found out the other day that like if you are a Patreon, because the Patreon page, if you guys, some of you have not signed up as a Patreon of someone, it looks very different from when you're
Once
not a
you signed
patron.
up, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the Patreon goals, I just couldn't even find them. I was
Yeah.
like looking for it and it's just not visible. And I will say Patreon just changed their UI, so maybe they just forgot to add it. But even when it was added before the UI change, it was still difficult to find. So
Yeah.
if you don't want to do Patreon goals because for whatever reason, you really don't have to. I don't think it's going to be detrimental for you.
Yeah.
But the only thing is that like we're going to talk about it because if you would like to do Patreon goals, then I will say, uh, always have it be a digital reward.
Oh, yeah.
Don't promise them that like, hey guys, if we reach $500, I will send everyone a T-shirt. Because that's gonna be that's a lot of money for you, and
It's
it's a
very
lot of
expensive.
work. Yeah, you really don't have to. It's okay. You can celebrate reaching a cool goal with your Patreon without having to send them stuff because digital rewards are just as great as physical ones. And
Yeah.
so,
If
um,
you're ready, if you're ready for getting merch and having physical rewards, that's great, but you don't have to feel like you're supposed to do that for goals. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. And so the way that I have used my Patreon goals in the past is that the whole reason that I have them there is just because I like giving my patrons a little extra stuff for like helping us reach whatever goal it was that I said. It's a
Mhm.
fun way for me to draw something um, out of the ordinary every now and then, but also it's a good it is like something you can use for what's it called, promoting your Patreon as well,
Yeah.
because the way that I do it is that um, I will reach a goal and it's usually just an illustration of some kind. I finish the illustration when I have the time, and then I post it for my Patreons as early access, and then after a couple weeks or something, then I will make it public access, and then I will promote it on my Webtoon that like, hey, on Patreon, we reached this goal and it's super cool. So this is what I drew for them, and you can all go and download it for free. So then they will go check out your Patreon to get a free wallpaper.
Yeah,
Um,
so a way to like tie into the title, like building your Patreon around your webtoon is one of this is a good example that like you can use these goals to create further illustrations that you can then give out to all of your readers, but remind them on when you're promoting it on your webtoon that this illustration is free for everyone because of my patrons
yeah,
helping me reach this goal. Because then you give out something new to all of your readers. You're promoting your webtoon with it because they can have it as their wallpaper and then their friends can see it, all that, they can share it with their friends if they want to. But you also mention your Patreon while you're giving them free content that, like, you can download it on Patreon.
Yeah.
So that's a good way of mixing the two, you know?
Yeah. Okay, posting schedule. So this is one of, well, this is another thing of like trying, because the thing is, you are already busy working on your comic, assumedly, and also a lot of people are also working a job on the side next to the comic.
Yeah.
So you want to really use the tools that Patreon that Patreon gives you, namely the scheduling tool. Um, Try to really just, as much as you can, get a buffer for your Patreon rewards. If you have early access, then this is the thing for all rewards. An overall suggestion, I think that it's, in general, it's good to have a buffer for your comic, but it's also good to have a buffer for your Patreon rewards, because
Yes.
sometimes you will fall behind on doing it, and just like sometimes you will fall behind on doing your comic, and in those times a buffer is really good to have. And then also, if you have that buffer, you can schedule stuff ahead, so you don't have to sit down exactly at 4 p.m. and click the post button, because you don't have
Yeah.
time for that, because you're working or doing other stuff. So
Yeah. You have to keep in mind that your main focus is your comic. That's your main schedule. That's the thing that needs to get done. And everything else should be built into your schedule, but not be the focus. And the best way to do that is to figure out how much time do you need to comfortably, without getting injured, please, with taking breaks, how much time do you need to do your episode? And then how much time do you have left of the month where you can produce Patreon rewards ahead of time and just schedule it? Like, I personally have I usually like mark an entire day or two in my calendar every like 4 months, where I just do a batch of Not Safe for Work sketches because it's one of my rewards, right? And then I do like four, five, six sketches in one day. And then I schedule them one for each month ahead of time. And then I'm done for like half a year, you know? Because you have to organize your work like this, because if you don't, you will constantly feel like you're not doing enough on Patreon and you're supposed to be doing more, because hustle culture is everywhere around us on the internet, right?
yeah.
Artists are constantly pressured to do more in less time, but keep up the quality, which is insane and it's impossible. So you have to like sit down and actually fight this urge of like constantly doing more. So I highly, highly recommend to set healthy expectations in what rewards you're offering and how frequently you're doing that. And trust us when we say that quality is more important than quantity. Use the scheduling tool. Don't be shy to work ahead of time. It's not like you're keeping something back from them. You're just making sure that you're not injuring yourself in the coming months so you can continue to give them the story that they love.
Yeah, and also it's important to keep in mind that you're the one that set the expectations for your patrons and how often there's going to be posted stuff. So you don't, patrons are not going to sign up and be like, "Oh boy, I sure hope that they post every hour of every single day during the month, because otherwise it's not worth my money." Um it's okay if you can, usually rewards on Patreon is like they are expecting a thing once a month. Unless,
Yeah,
for example, let's say it's early access. If you update more than once a month, then they will just expect it every time there's a new update out. That's it.
yeah,
You don't have to, you don't have to post every single day or every second day. And also with a posting schedule in general, if you're thinking like, "Oh, I have to like make sure that every Tuesday I post this and then every second Wednesday I post here," just figure out a schedule that works for you, that works with your work schedule in general. Like, for example, the way that I post on, and like the way that I go about posting on my Patreon is that The week before I know that an episode goes up, then I have work in progress for that episode scheduled. And then the week later, the episode goes up. And it just keeps going like that throughout the month. So it's very easy to keep in mind. And then the monthly illustration, if I don't have a buffer for it and I actually have to work on it that month, then I will post the work in progress when I'm able to. And then I will post the finished art a couple of days later. And that's it. It doesn't have to be like every first of the month that I have to post the monthly art because otherwise they're gonna leave and they will hate me. It's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
You are human too, and they are human. Like
Yeah.
they care about you, they care about your work, they want you to be healthy, and you should prioritize that because if you're not healthy, you're not gonna be able to run your comic or your Patreon for that matter.
Yeah. And if you're like me and you don't really have a concept of like how much work I'm actually doing in a month, because I struggle with that a lot, I always feel like I barely do anything. Um, a system that I figured out for myself that helped me a lot is that I have a table calendar, like a standing calendar, and every time I schedule something for Patreon, I mark it on my calendar with red. So when I start my workday, I can just look at my calendar on my desk and see that I have already posted several times this month. Everything is okay. It's not like I didn't do anything because it's like I have very short memory. Like I go to sleep and my memory resets. Goodbye. I do not remember what I did this week, you know? So when I start my workday the next day, I have this feeling of like, oh, I should post something to Patreon as well because I didn't give them anything this month. And then in reality, I look at my calendar and I've already posted 10 times in the last 2 weeks. There's no need to push myself further, you know? So, yeah, keep a tab on what you're doing so you can stay healthy and have a healthy schedule.
Yeah.
Oh, statistics. Oh, my favorite, my favorite. So, this is not going to be very long. It's more like just a tip. Not everyone knows, but on Patreon, when you open up the statistics tab, usually on the bottom, it's set on the overall, which is going to show you just your patrons in the last 30 days and stuff like that, you know. And it's useful and everything, but for the longest time I didn't know that you can click on tiers on the bottom and then you're greeted with this graph that will show you how your patrons have changed separated by tiers. And that's good because this is a very good way of keeping an eye on like which which tier is stable and therefore means that people are probably happy with those rewards, and which tier has a big turnout, you know, which is the one where people leave a lot, for example, or which is the one where there's a big growth in one of the months. Like, for example, if you're launching a new reward in one specific tier, this statistics can help you keep an eye on how it was received. Did you get an uptick? You know, did people suddenly start joining that tier specifically? Because then that means that that's a good reward that's popular. And maybe if there's a lot of people subscribing to it, maybe it's underpriced a little. So you can push it up to another tier the next time you're revamping your Patreon. So, yeah, I would just suggest that when you have the time, you actually look around in Patreon's statistics and see what information you can get out of it. That's it.
Okay, so next up is community building. Because if you have a Patreon and you have patrons, then you're going to end up with a community. And so, just a few like things, tips or things to keep in mind. Very important to communicate with your patrons if there are changes coming up, like you're changing rewards or you're sunsetting rewards or you have to go on a break. Always tell your patrons. You
Ahead of
don't,
time.
yeah, tell them ahead of time. Give them a heads up. Like, for example, if you're sunsetting a reward, tell them, like, preferably a month before if you can. But otherwise, tell them a few weeks before so that they have time to change their tiers or stay if they want to, and so on. You don't have to tell them, for example, if you're changing your tier, you don't have to be like, oh, guys, it's okay if you want to leave my Patreon. You don't have to
Don't do
do
that.
that, you know?
Don't give them an idea that they didn't have before, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
Don't
just
tell them to
communicate.
leave.
Yeah, yeah, don't just communicate with them. You don't have to apologize either for changing stuff because it's a part of the process, you know?
Yeah, it's
So,
like we said in the beginning when we were talking about wording your About Me section. Stay positive and stay professional. There's no need to put down your work or be overly apologetic because you're just doing what's best for your career. And they will understand. Honestly, people who are already willing to become your patron are usually really sweet. They want to see you succeed. So if you just talk to them and let them know that, like, hey, this reward is not working out, so I'm sunsetting it. I will let you guys know if I have come up with something else instead of it. But until then, you have until the end of this month to save these rewards if you would like to, because I'm going to be discontinuing them afterwards. And I can tell you, 99% of your patrons will be like, yay, that sounds good. You go, you know? So they're very supportive.
yeah, honestly, just like, it's our third point here, but your patrons are just people like you. They're not numbers, and you shouldn't treat them like that because, yeah, they're people. So just treat them with respect like you would any other person. Think of
Yeah,
them as
just
like, yeah, they are readers of your work. They love what you do. That's why they are there. They're not there because they hate you and they want to see you fail or anything like that. So just remember that, they're not some kind of number on the screen. And also just in general, like, yeah, sure, they signed up and they are paying for their rewards, but you're also giving them rewards. So it's not like they owe you anything or you owe them anything, but it's just good
it's
to
equal
treat them.
exchange.
Yeah, treat them with respect, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same as on Webtoon itself, that you have a community there. There are people who comment on your work, and we all take time how much we can take to answer comments that we can. It's the same on Patreon. You should try to talk to your patrons, communicate with them, answer comments if you can. Of course, if like you become wildly successful and there's just an overwhelming amount of comments, it doesn't mean that you have to reply to every single one. But yeah, as much as you can, just chat with
Yeah.
them.
Also, like, I'm saying this as as a very introverted person who has I don't have a lot of well, I'm not sure about the wording. Yeah, I'm sorry, English is not my first language. But it's like sometimes you don't have enough mental space or energy, you know what I mean, for interacting with a bunch of strangers all the time online. And so
Yeah.
if you're running your comic and you're running social media, and especially if you are uploading your comic on multiple platforms, so that you have like comments on, yeah, different websites, it's okay if you can't answer every single comment. If you have the energy for it, if you love doing it, then keep doing it. But if you're like me, where I love reading the comments from my readers, and I really really appreciate that they are leaving a comment in the first place, but I can't keep up with it, and I will start overthinking that, oh, maybe my response isn't good enough, or maybe I'm repeating myself too much, and they're gonna look at all my other replies and they're gonna think that I'm just, making stuff up or something, even though I'm trying to be genuine. Um, if you are like this, where it gets very overwhelming, then I would just suggest that just prioritize at the very least always answering comments that your Patreons put on your posts,
Yeah.
because it's usually a smaller amount than your readership. And I don't know. I just think that it's very nice. It's a nice gesture as well, because they are people that wanted to, like, pay money to get more things about your comic. So I feel like the least I could do is answer a comment that they made. And also it's just nice to talk to them. It's nice to make them feel like there is an actual person who is creating this work that they like. And so it's not like I never answer comments on Webtoons or on social media, but I will always try to prioritize answering comments on Patreon first and foremost. And then if I have the space or capacity to answer others, then I will do that.
Yeah.
Oh, so
This is our last section that is like Patreon specific before we go into like marketing and promoting on Webtoon.
yeah.
And it's fully gonna be to Soya because she's the only one out of the two of us who had this. I didn't have to transition into a new work
Not
yet.
yet.
So the stage is
It's
yours.
coming for you.
It's coming.
So, so since my current comic, Susuhara is a Demon, is not my first project, I reached a point because my other comic, It Stems from Love, it ran for a year. And I will also note, by the way, that I didn't start my Patreon like right when I started It Stems from Love. So so it was like, I don't know, near the end of the comic, actually, 3/4 into it, but I was still posting actively for quite a while about that comic. And so when I had to start up the next project, I was like, oh god, how do I make people still like interested in my next work and not all just leave me because they're like, well, I don't care about this rom-com comic that you're making next. So the thing that I did for my Patreons to get them like interested in the characters and get them interested in whatever next is coming up is that I would post, as you can see, these are just some example posts. Well, these are screenshots of my posts, but I have more of them. I posted work in progress shots of like, here's like one of the scenes that's gonna happen, but you can't read what the text is gonna be because I didn't put it in yet. I have in the right corner, you can see I was showing them the thumbnail that I was gonna put for it, and then the end cards that I drew these little chibis, and I talked just a little bit, not like a whole novel or anything, but I just talked a little bit about like, hey guys, this is what you can expect from the next project. And I started doing this while the old comic was still running. And I
Mm.
think that's a very important thing to do if you're able to, because it takes time for people to get used to the idea of a new comic. And also that they kind of have to get used to the thought of letting go of the old one because it's stopping soon. So I think that it's a very good idea, if you are able to, that you start to slowly introduce them to the idea of the new comic while you're still posting all the rewards for the old one. And then when the new one rolls around, I actually started posting Susuhara is a Demon while the old one was still ongoing. Not very long, but I was posting, I think, with like a month overlap between the two, because then at the end of your webtoon as well, you can say like, hey, check out the next one that's starting after this because it's already ongoing. And even before that, for my own Patreons, I gave them, because I had early access back then as well, I gave them early access to my new comic because, of course, I want them to get interested in the next work. So, like Madamka also said, because like it's important to do update notices with your patrons. So this is a snippet because it was a very long notice. I always do a TLDR and a timeline if necessary for how the changes are going to work. Specifically for this one, I had to change some of the tiers as well. I stopped doing a $1 tier. I had to move rewards around and I had to rename rewards and blah, 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 blah. So this is like a TLDR for people who don't want to read the full version of why stuff is changing. It's very quick and easy to read. And
Mhm.
I just always in general recommend try to, short as you can, and but still keeping it very informative. Um, have a TLDR and then have the long version after that. And then always tell people they can always comment or DM you if they are in any way like not sure. I also highly recommend when you're writing a notice of any kind to your patrons, especially when it's changes. I also gave them a heads up well in advance with this post, by the way. It's not like, oh, by the way, tomorrow all of this is happening. But I very highly recommend showing this notice that you wrote to someone else, and have them proofread it in a way, because what you are writing might make sense in your head, but then when someone else writes it or reads it, sorry, they might be like, what does this mean? I don't really
Mhm.
understand this part where you're saying that it's going to change to this, but then this. So then do I get the reward or not, for example? So it's really helpful to get a second set of eyes on it if you're able to.
Yeah. Also, I would like to note that in the previous slide, you can see that because she was talking about a tier getting deleted, she also warns people that if they don't change their tier, they will become a no benefit patron, a no tier patron. And then she links a resource, an article made by Patreon on how to edit your membership. This is what we were trying to get to when we were telling you all that you need to make sure that Patreon is easy to use for your patrons. It's in your best interest to make the transition for them as easy as possible. So if they have to edit their membership, try to be one step ahead and already give them a link to a tutorial made by Patreon themselves, like an article on how to do that, because they might not know, you know? So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a very good example.
Thank you. So, okay, next up we have marketing and promotion. Maybe this is what people were waiting for all along. I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge marketing nut, so I really, really like marketing. I think it's really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
so
But
first of
we're
all,
also, this is like, we said this in the beginning, but I would like to just repeat it. These are not set rules. These are
yeah,
just things that we learned in our run on Webtoon and Patreon. These are things that we think work because it worked for us, but it's not like this is the only way to do it. So take it with a hint of salt and try to apply it to how you also would like to do it, you know?
yeah, it's very important to personalize and also get tips and ideas from multiple creators. So if it helps you, then great, and if it doesn't, that's totally fair. This is just what works for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, so first of all, branding. We mentioned this a bunch of times, and now we're gonna actually go into it. Uh, Branding for your comic and you as a creator in general is, I think, very important. The branding that I'm kind of going for with Suzu is that it's bright colors. It's like a really stereotypical comic-y look, like you can see on my Patreon banner here to the left and the top, that it's got this like dotted pattern on the background because that's it looks like old comic-y art, you know. All of the colors are very coherent and they are very fun. um I want, because the comic itself is kind of like, yeah, it's a rom-com, so I want to have this feeling of like a rom-com anime, that it's like it's spunky, it's fun, and you put a bunch of jokes everywhere because I love making jokes. So that also carries over to the branding that I do. Um,
Yeah.
and then the thing that I try to do to, like, make it my own, not just like any rom-com anime, but then it's a rom-com anime, but it has cool delinquents. It's got muscular women, and
Yeah.
so
And
uh, sorry.
no, no, continue, continue.
So even on the right, you can see this is my pinned post from Twitter that I recently made, because I had an old one and now I updated it. So I think a pinned post on Twitter, by the way, very good idea. Look at how other creators are doing it and then try to make your own that fits your comic brand. You can see that I actually reused this picture of my two main characters a lot. This was actually a Patreon goal illustration. But I really like how it turned out. So now it's just the face of my comic. Because it fits the overall like vibe. You get an idea of the series just from that. And then I have like some um, other like this is the second picture is an illustration I did as well for Pride Month, and then the third one is a panel from the comic that I think is fun. So you can also see in the text that I put in like there's like little emojis that are colorful. So I'm still trying to keep everything in mind with the sort of idea the feeling that I want people to have when they look at my work and they look at my posts.
Yeah. And this is what we meant in the beginning when we were talking about how Patreon is kind of like an in real life shop, that the face of the shop, the outside, should reflect what you're getting inside. You have to think of Patreon and other social media and your Webtoon in that way, that like you need to look all of these accounts and all of these posts and all of the visuals that you're using together and make sure that it's consistent.
Yeah,
And
100%.
then yeah.
Sorry.
And then when it comes to mine, like this is just to show you all that like even though we are following the same principles in how you're supposed to do this, our aesthetic is very different and the mood is very different. So when it comes to my branding, I'm not doing the jokes and the bright color, like the fun light colors. I go for darker colors because mine is a fantasy comic about witches. There's a little bit of drama. There's this like fashionista aesthetic and everything. So I try to go for more of this like, ooh, mystery, intrigue. Wow, look at them. They're witches. Oh my God. And then the way I just try to keep it consistent is that I build the color scheme around my main character, who is the pink haired girl. So there's a lot of pink highlighted, but also blue complements that really well. So I just go for a pink and blue color scheme on most of my social media and in my branding.
Yeah, sorry.
And then she
I
stays out.
had one. I had one of those moments where I was saying something in my head and then I was like, oh, my mouth isn't moving. So, but yeah, there's a very big difference in the way that we do our branding,
Mm,
but yeah, you just personalize it to what you want. Don't make it what you think that like oh well others are doing things like this, so I'll just do it exactly like that. Personalize it, make it what is fun for you.
mhm,
And then now promoting your Patreon on Webtoons. This is a Webtoon workshop after all. A few things to keep in mind. We drew a little template. So this is an example of for both me and Madamka what our end of episode promotion can look like. So
mhm.
it's always in this kind of order, which is like it's kind of the same as when you were setting up the reward tiers description and stuff like that. You always want to put the most important thing at the top, and it's always the Patreon promotion.
Yeah.
In that sense, I will say it's not that you should put the Patreon promotion in the very start of the episode. It has to be
No.
after the episode. So, because if you put it at the start, people will be like, "Oh, it's just an ad," and they will scroll over it. And also, they went into your comic to read the comic, not to read your promotion. So, I very highly suggest that you put all the promotion you have at the bottom. Um, so as you can see on the little template, it says end of episode, and then you have a little bit of space so that it's not all crammed together. And then you have the patron promotion. And then after that,
Immediately.
yeah, immediately after, don't put other things. Just put the patron promotion first because you want people for it to be the first thing they see right after the episode ends. Like, have a bit
Yeah.
of gutter space, but it should still be because they are expecting another panel. You know what I mean? So they're either expecting another panel, or if you, because I know that Madame Care writes to be continued at the end.
Yeah.
But even then, they will have to keep scrolling to maybe go to the next episode or go to the comments. So always put the Patreon promotion first, and then you can put other stuff you want, like comic recommendation, or put a fan art feature, or if you have a notice or whatever. Um, and then socials at the very, very bottom, because your socials don't change. So they are not the most important thing for the comic, it's the
Yeah.
Patreon.
It should be on the bottom. You have to keep in mind that, like, when it's the end of your episode, a lot of people, as soon as they gather from the context in the update that, like, oh, this is probably the end of the episode, they are very ready to click out, you know? Not everyone is interested in the comment section. So they're just gonna click out of the episode. So, right after your last panel, that's why you should start with whatever is eye catching, and that's your promotion, you know? Like, I expect, especially because I put to be continued there, that I know that people gather there, that, like, okay, this is the end of the episode, but I put the promo close enough to the panel that they see a little bit of a sneak peek of it, because that might grab their interest, and then they will scroll down and they're like, oh, what is this? And then they check out my teaser. And then under that, you can have the other type of promotions. But that's another thing that, like, you need to schedule ahead, because people have a limit to the attention span. You can't have your end card be just endless and it's like Patreon promo and then more promo and then a recommendation of my friend and then fan art feature and then a new illustration I made that you can download for free and then my socials. They're not going to read all of that. So instead, try to schedule ahead of time and minimize what you're pushing into one promotion. There's a limit to it, you know? Less is more. Like, always try to just promo one or two things. And if there's anything else you want to promote, do it the next episode. Like, there's always next time, you know?
Yeah, a call to action for the end of your episodes, like, uh, because people also, you don't want to give them too many options because then they're going to be confused about which one is the most important option. So that's why, like, the Patreon promotion will always stay there. But if you want to shout out a comic, then of course do it, but do it after the Patreon promotion. And then
Yeah.
if you do the, comic shout out, and you want to do like, hey, I have a wallpaper that you can download, go to this link, blah blah blah, then maybe take the wallpaper and put it in the next one, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also
Yeah.
a thing in general,
Try
for
to,
oh,
yeah,
sorry, go
sorry.
on.
Just in general, like, this is like the main takeaway. Try to declutter your advertisement at the end. Like, you can see that, for example, Soya's is very clean, you know? Mine looks a little bit more busy because I go for that aesthetic vibe, so I have more illustrations in the background, but it's still just three main stuff. Patreon promo, another promo in the middle, socials, that's it. And one way how I tried to, like, optimize it and declutter it is, for example, in the past, I had another blurb at the end of my end card, which was about liking the episode. And that's fair because, you know, liking the episode helps us with engagement. So, of course, you would want to prompt your readers to do that. But I realized later on that I could just put that before the episode because it's not advertisement per se. So it's not like you're greeting them immediately with Patreon because that's not good practice. But just having the like prompt that, like, please don't forget to like the episode in the beginning, cleaned up my end card a little bit. So whenever you're sitting down to figure out your template for how you're going to do your end card, just try to be strategic about it. What is it that I can remove? What is it that I can put in a different spot? How do I make this clean and easy to read?
Yeah, it's definitely the same thing again of like informative but short. Like,
Yeah.
I do all of my branding based on my own attention span, which is horrible. So I'm like, I want it to be attention grabbing and it needs to give me the information immediately. I don't like reading a bunch of text because I will just glaze over it and then not read it.
Yeah.
So yeah, for also in terms of attention grabbing stuff, it is important. It's very important that First of all, make a template for this end of episode thing. And
Yeah.
then when you have the template, change out the pictures every new episode. It
Yes.
shouldn't be the same picture every single episode, because the issue with that is that people get used to it, that like, oh, it's just the same picture every single time, and then they will get so used to it that they are like, oh, this is the end of episode, like social media or whatever, and then they won't even read it anymore. You have to show them that, like, also, just in general, it's good for to show that there's stuff happening on your Patreon. You don't want
New
people to feel
content.
like, yeah, you don't want people to feel like, so you're just never posting anything on there because it's the same picture for like 50 episodes now. But yeah, for early access, for example, on mine, you can see that it's like it has to be an interesting panel from that episode. I'm not spoiling, but I'm just giving them a teaser of like, this is what you could read. This is the next episode, and then I show them a preview of my illustration that I do for that month, but I don't show them the entire illustration because that's what they have to pay for. Just like they have to pay to read the entire early access, um, and so yeah, you can see that I have like little thumbnail versions of the full illustration, but they are so tiny that they won't really be able to, you know, get much out of
Use
it.
it.
Other, yeah, they can just see that like, oh, this is cute, and I can use it on my phone or my PC. So
Yeah.
it's the same for, Madamka's not safe for work tier, teaser. Always change it out. And if you have, like, for example, we post twice a month, so
Hmm.
so then if you have a monthly reward, like a monthly art or a monthly not safe for work art, then you don't necessarily have two new not safe for work art for that month. So for that, you can just use a past picture. It's not that
Yeah.
you can't reuse pictures, but don't
But
just use the
rotate them.
same. Yeah,
Yeah.
like really rotate them, because
Yeah.
people will also forget. They're like, sometimes I have put an older illustration in, and people will be like, "Oh wow, that looks really cool," and I'm like, "I already showed you this, but I'm glad you think so. Thank you." So, so yeah, use templates and change the promotion pictures, and also remember your branding, as you
Yeah.
can see.
And set up templates to make it easier to keep up with it. Because, like, I know that I don't always have the energy to change all of the pictures if I would have to build this end card from the ground up every single time. So, what I do instead is that I set up a template one time that works really well, and then I don't have to always start from the bottom. For example, the Patreon tier teaser, you can see that it has this like paper rip effect. I did that by having a folder in Clip Studio that has a mask on it that has that paper cut out. And then if I drop a picture into that folder, it's not gonna go out of the paper tier space, you know? It doesn't matter how big that picture is. I never have to crop them. I just position them however I want to, but I don't have to bother always doing a perfect paper
No.
eraser, you know? And I can just change it. And then also, we don't have a screenshot of that, but in the middle section where there's like more Patreon promo on this screenshot, that's the space that I sometimes use to promo my friends' comics or comics that I read. And I reached out to them if they would give me a few panels to promo them with. And the way I set up that promotion as well is that all of the text and the frames that I use around their panels, I have all of those in a folder, like the text stuff, and I have a hue and saturation changeable layer on top of it. So instead of going into every single text file and changing the color to match the vibe of the comic that I'm promoting, instead of doing it one by one, I just change the entire folder's hue and saturation so it can easily match the vibe that the comic has. And I don't have to be like, I don't have to do extra work and it doesn't take a long time. So then I'm actually gonna do it because I know myself, and sometimes I would be too lazy to change the colors and I would just leave the previous colors in and then feel guilty about it that I didn't optimize it to match their art and that I'm a bad friend, you know? Like, just be smart about it. If you know that you don't always have the energy for something, then find a way to work around it.
Yeah. So this is gonna be very short because we kind of went into it a little bit. Like, don't make it a scroll marathon. Madamka
Yeah.
already went into this. Don't put too much info in. Don't put too little info in. I know it sounds a bit confusing, but for example, on our promotion here, you know, Madame K is writing Patreon not safe for work tier teaser. She's not writing like 10 it costs $10 and you get it once a month and I have this backlog and I also have all this other, it's short and informative. It's the same for mine. Read ahead on my Patreon. This is the episode number. You also get monthly art. That's super cool. Too little info would be for like I'm just trying to think of an example. So it's not that I'm thinking of something I actually saw. But too little info would, for example, be if I just had the social media and then it says patreon.com at Soya's home. And
Yeah.
then the thing is also like in general, it's good to put the Patreon URL in there. Because yeah, sure, people can click on the become a Patreon button, but I still think it's nice to have there. Also, if you are a not safe for work Patreon artist, don't like. I mean, in general, just don't do this. But don't like when you are doing the write ups. For example, you can see that for our social media, we just write our username and then there's like a little icon for the social media. If you have that for Patreon, Madamka does it here as well. She writes the URL for the Patreon, but only for
Fully.
the
Yeah.
Patreon. And it's because on Patreon, you can search for a username, but you can only find the actual user in the search bar if they are not a not safe for work creator. If they're not safe
Yes.
for work, they're not going to show up in searches. And they're not
Yeah.
going to show up in Google searches as well, as far as I know. So people need to know the URL just in case. So yeah, but too little information would be that you just put like Patreon at Madamka,
Yeah.
or even if you just put the URL but then no pictures at all, then that's
Or
kind of like imagine that you go to the cinema and a new Batman movie came out or some other kind of new movie came out and then there's no posters and there's no trailer and anything at all, but it's like, hey, you should watch this movie, it's very good, but it just says a new movie out. So people need to see what they can get. That's why you have the pictures there.
yeah. Also, another example of too little information would be if you can go back to the previous slide. Um, if my teaser just said teaser and then it's the river picture. Teaser of what, girl? Where can I find this? What is this supposed to be? Is this a teaser of the next episode? Is this a teaser for an illustration? Is this Patreon content? Where can I find it? So instead, I have it clear as day Patreon, not safe for work tier teaser. And like, of course, you can shorten it a little bit, like not safe for work teaser would be enough, but I like to be specific so you understand that it's on Patreon.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'm also specific in mine. As you can see, I say read ahead on Patreon. And then I don't mention, like, also get monthly illustrations on Patreon because they get that it's also a
Yeah.
part of it, but I do
Yeah. Yeah.
mention it.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Exactly.
also, this is very short. Don't use a bunch of different fonts, just use the same font. Or
Yeah.
at
Oh,
most use two fonts, but don't use like 10 different fonts because it's very confusing for people visually.
yeah. Some people tend to think, and I understand where the logic comes from, but some people tend to think that the more loud colors and the more block of colors they have and different fonts, the more it will grab the attention. And I get that because you are usually like advised to do something eye-catching. Yeah, one thing, or like make sure that all together it's eye-catching, but not like five differently eye-catching things, because then you will end up with overstimulation. It looks like I mean, this is kind of mean, but it was kind of look like one of those like scam websites where everything is flashing in
Oh,
your
like
face and like
a bunch
click
of
on this and
pop-ups.
chat with us and pop up and everything. Yeah. So you really need to make it like clean. Try to only have one or two fonts at most, you know, preferably the fonts that you're using otherwise in your comic and in your branding anyways, so it's something that builds the mood of the comic further, you know,
Yeah.
and try to make it visually pleasing. I mean, we're all visual artists, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem, but yeah, just keep it in mind that it needs to be easy to read.
Yeah. Next up, this is Madamka's corner.
Oh, it's my area. Yeah, so I wanted to have a little section about this because I think that we all know that not safe for work content is kind of hard to advertise and market because it's censored on a lot of platforms, Webtoon included, and they do that for a good reason. You know, they are a kid-friendly platform that adults use as well, of course, but they have to abide by certain rules and everything. And that's all in the TOS, and we have to abide by that. So make sure that you read it. And even if the TOS seems like confusing or not clear enough, that's first of all, from their point of view, that's because they have to cover all of their bases, you know? And I know from personal experience that it can be frustrating to try and figure out what you can do and what you can do. But the best thing you can do is to actually reach out to Webtoons, write to creator support. They have an email address. I think it's like creatorsupport@webtoon.com, something like that. I think Luxie can write it in the chat for us. Reach out to them before your episode goes up if you're unsure and be like, hey, here's a screenshot of the promo that I'm doing. Is this okay? Will this pass? They will reply to you and do their best to help you out with it. And in case you didn't do that because you didn't think that there would be a problem and you get flagged like I did one time, you will get an email about it, right? That your episode got taken down and that you should change it according to the TOS so that they can restore it. And obviously, if you didn't expect it to be changed, like taken down, like I didn't, then you're not gonna know what's the problem. So my advice would be that when you communicate with them, understand that they're also doing their job. Try to instead of arguing that you shouldn't have removed it, try to just find a solution, you know. Like when I was communicating with Webtoon about the episode that got removed for me because of the Not Safe for Work teaser, I tried to be proactive and I did several different edits and then I explained it to them that like, hey, I could do it like this and I could do it like this, which one would work? And for example, Webtoon doesn't allow like block censoring, you know, so you can't have a not safe for work picture and then just put an emoji on it on the juicy bits and then call it a day. That's not allowed. It needs to be a natural part of the scenery. And honestly, the way I do it by now, you can see it on these examples as well. I just don't include anything that's explicit anymore. People react really well to expressions to begin with, so I usually focus on the facial expression of my not safe for work art and use that as the teaser because it's the characters that your readers are caring about, not a body part of theirs specifically, you know? And the whole intrigue is supposed to be in like, oh, this month the Nazi for work art is Carta. I wonder what the rest of the illustration looks like, you know? So I think in general, it's safer and it's better to just mark it with the expressions and the faces of your characters that your readers already know. And if you're unsure, email Canvas. And also understand that Canvas is not originals. If you see something that you feel like breaks the TOS in an originals comic, the TOS that we use is not the one that they have to abide by. The rules are different for originals and Canvas, and that's just how things are. So just don't expect, like, don't look at originals as a guideline, is what I'm saying, because it's not. So if you're unsure, just email them. That's the easiest way ahead. And try to choose engaging crops, either the facial expression or speech bubble. Speech bubbles are a very good way of teasing what is happening in this art without showing it, because you can see on the bottom one that it's mentioned that it's a library. So then I teased the setting of the art, but you can only see the background and the actual happenings if you go to Patreon. So that would be my wisdom for all of y'all aspiring Nazi forward Patreon artists. Do with it what ye will.
Okay, we have yeah, so then we have a little short section about promoting on social media because well, first point, you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. So it is very good to, you know, of course, promote your Patreon where you are posting your comic on Webtoons, for example. So yeah, absolutely promote it there, but it's not like you shouldn't promote it ever anywhere else. And so, again, very shortly, use templates, set up templates so that it's much quicker for you to put together a promotion. Um, Always use interesting, engaging panels and art because you definitely have it in your comic. And then use the scheduling tool so you don't have to, because they're basically schedule everything you can on Webtoons, on social media. If you can get away with scheduling it, then do it. Engage with the creator community. It's not that like you should only engage with creators because then maybe they can shout out your comic or something. Please don't do that. Just because, we're all just people. Don't treat other people like a way to get you an extra promotion, but more that when you are engaging with a community, first of all, you're making friends, and that's great. You're going to learn a lot of stuff from other people. And maybe
Yeah.
they can learn stuff from you as well. And also, if you then have something that you want to like put out, or like a new episode that comes up or something, usually people are very nice to want to share your post, because why not? Like, I love sharing other artists' posts and supporting them. Why not? So yeah, engage with the community. Use templates, use scheduling tools. And then in terms of what social media that you could use, also, again, all of this advice, this is just for our like personal advice. So if you don't want to follow it, you don't have to. um,
Yeah.
Except for, if there's anything, do follow the advice of don't just become friends with people so that they will promote your stuff, because that's not very nice.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the one thing I will be very hard on. Don't do that. It's not cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in general, for like social media that you can promote on, right now TikTok is like, I know a lot of people now are going to be like, oh god damn it, TikTok, because it's videos and I don't like doing videos. But it is worth it to try and like see if you can figure out how to use TikTok. Look at what other creators are doing. Mainly look at what readers are doing for stuff that they like, because they have the eye of like a reader, what other readers would like to see. Because
Yes.
when you are in the promotion mindset, you might be like, oh, I'll just make a TikTok that's like, hey, the next episode is up. But if someone who does not know your comic at all sees that, they're not going to be interested, because it's like, oh, well, that's just a random ad for some comic I don't know. So
Yeah.
it takes a while to get into. I'm not going to get into how to do specific promotions, because that's not what this blah blah. Well, that's not what this workshop is about. But yeah, TikTok is very good right now. Twitter is also good, because there's
Twitter is
hashtag
very
events and
good.
stuff.
Twitter is very good for staying in the loop. I always try to say this to people who have a hard time with Twitter, like other creators, where they're like, I don't really see the point of Twitter. I don't see growth there. I look at Twitter as kind of an informal news feed in my own community. That's where I keep a tab on what others are up to, what is happening in the webcomic sphere in general, not just on Webtoons, but mainly there, of course. And I just use Twitter as like, you just have to like keep an eye on what is trending. If there are artist hashtags that you can post into, don't be afraid to repost the same drawing. Do it all the time. If you go to Twitter and look at my media tab, I'm constantly reposting the same pictures
Yeah.
because it's not going to be the same people who see it. And even if it's the same people, they probably already forgot about it because the last time you posted it was a month ago, you know?
Yeah, you can also
So,
just retweet the post and then
oh yeah,
a
that
month
definitely.
later just unretweet it and then retweet it again. It's fine.
Definitely. Definitely. And how about your fellow creators? If you see their post, retweet it or leave a supportive comment. Every little helps. And, it's like good things come back to you. If you're supportive towards others, they will be supportive towards you as well. But yeah, never go into it with the expectation, especially on Twitter, that like I'm just gonna grow so much overnight because it's not really how it works.
No, it's a
Um,
very nice place to make friends, honestly.
yeah. Instagram, and also this is just my personal hot tip for Twitter. Because I know that a lot of people think that Twitter can be very toxic or like depressing with real life events. You can actually create a list for yourself that you add specific users to, and then have that pinned on your main page. So it's like a secondary timeline. So, for example, I have a list with only Sims builders because they are very chill and they only post about builds that they made in Sims and I like it. So, whenever I open Twitter, I immediately click over on my list because it does wonders for my mental health. Instead of just being bombarded with everything that happened on Twitter in general, immediately as soon as I open up the app, I just look at cute Sims houses first, and then I start interacting with tweets that happened and everything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and then on the list, you might be wondering why is that in blue? It's because Instagram and niche specific subreddits. I put these in just like sort of short. Not really going to go into detail either, but it's just that I don't really use it too much. But if you do TikToks, you can repost them to Instagram for Reels because Instagram now wants to be TikTok. So basically, you can upload your TikToks onto there. Reels do way better than picture posts at this point. So if you want to use Instagram, then you can do it this way. I just don't really use Instagram anymore, but it is a possibility. And then niche specific subreddits. If you, like, let's say you do a horror comic, then there are subreddits dedicated to horror stuff. Or let's say you do a horror comic specifically about cryptids, then you can go to cryptid subreddits, read the rules every single time. Of course, you don't want to go somewhere where they're like, "Don't promote your stuff here," and then you're like, "Hi, read my comic." But if they don't mind promotion, then why not like show them something that they are interested in anyways that your comic has to do with. But yeah, I would be a little like um, vary with Reddit because some subreddits are very nice and people are nice there, but some places people will like go to your comic and just like give it a bad rating because they are angry and they're like, why would you promote on the Reddit? So it's just something that like you can consider if you would like, but you don't have to do it. So I just wanted to mention it. And then in terms of
Oh,
where, oh sorry.
no, no, you continue.
Oh, in terms of where not to promote, uh, any creator only space, honestly, like creator focused discords, discords like Discord servers where there are only other creators, or non niche subreddits, like for example, a Webtoon Canvas subreddit or a Webtoons subreddit. They are fine for talking about comics, but they are not a good place for you to be like, hey, read my comic. Because usually these type of subreddits, they are full of just creators. And if because they are not niche specific, it's a very, very wide audience, even if there are readers on there. So I don't think that it's worth your time. And when it has to do with creator only spaces, there's no reason to just promote only to other creators because they're working on their own stuff. So you want to promote to readers, not to other creators. It's not that other creators aren't great, but you shouldn't be promoting in their face.
Yeah. It's also just like simple logic that, like, for example, my comic is about witches, right? If I go to the Webtoon or webcomic Reddit, that like the entire Reddit is about webcomics. If I put in another link to another comic, it's not gonna stand out because that's literally what everyone is doing. But if I go to a Reddit thread that is about witches and modern witches, maybe, and I check their rules and I'm allowed to promote, if I then put in a link to a comic there that is about witches, then I stand out because not the entire thing is about comics. It's mainly about witches, and maybe I'm gonna be the only person that month who brings up webcomics in that context. So then you stand out and then you have a chance at promoting. But another thing that I wanted to note, that this doesn't mean that you can't use comic Reddits at all. You can, but you just have to have a different approach. Like, for example, I posted pages from my comic whenever I was proud of a page that I did, or I redid my prologue, and then I posted the pages on the Webtoon Reddit. But it wasn't like a straight up promotion, It wasn't a link and like read my comic. Instead, it was like I wanted to share these pages because I'm very proud of them, and I redid my prologue, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. And then, if people are interested, then they can ask you for a link or look it up themselves. So it's
Yeah.
not in their face.
Also, mostly for like quickly for when you are promoting on non-social media sites like Reddit, for example. I would not like directly promote the Patreon. You want to promote the comic, and then people go to your comic, and then they see the Patreon promotion. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
So on
yeah.
social media, it's a little different because your entire profile is about your comic, and they probably follow you hopefully because they like your comic or they find your comic through social media. But there, it's a little easier to promote the Patreon rewards as well. But don't do that on Reddit. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is our last section before we can just go into Q&A if you guys have any questions. It's rapid fire tips and tricks. They are very quick. We just didn't know where to like put them in the workshop itself. The first one is about changing tiers and prices. First of all, to let them know in advance. Second, keep in mind when you're changing tiers and prices that you can't change the price of a tier. You have to unpublish the tier and then create a new one with the new price. And that will mean that everyone who's on that tier that you're unpublishing now will have to sign over to the other one, or they can stay on the old tier, but they're either not gonna get further rewards because the rewards are logged into the other tier now, um, or they can just stay there and give you the money monthly, but new people will not see that tier. And that's good for you because then they can't subscribe to it. But a good thing that you can do is to message people on that tier that, like, hey, you are still on this tier, and that's completely fair if you're okay with it that you're not receiving the rewards. But if you would like to get the new rewards, please change to this new tier that I did. And this also goes hand in hand with the next bullet point, which is to message patrons whose bank card declined. I started doing this a few months ago. I didn't really do it before because I was like, well, I shouldn't be like pestering them to update the bank details, because if they wanted to get the rewards, they would probably do it. So it just kind of feels like I'm pestering them for money. But then I did it in the end, and lo and behold, most of my patrons actually messaged me back and were saying thank you for it because they just forgot about it. And Patreon only sends them an email like once or twice that like, hey, your card declined, update your details. And so when I messaged them, and it wasn't a generic email sent by a corporation, but it was a message from me, the creator, that prompted them to actually do it. So they were like, oh my god, I haven't received the rewards for like 2 months now, I'm gonna go and like change it now. Thank you for letting me know. And then we just wished each other a great day. Everyone was happy. Life goes on. Also, for engaging your audience on Patreon, use polls. They are very popular. It's very low effort on your patrons' end. It's better than asking them to leave a comment because people don't always have the energy to type out all of their thoughts, you know? And instead, if you give them options, they can just click on it. It's easier. It's better for you as well to keep a track of it. And you can use it for choosing the next illustration or choosing between two rewards. And you can also use it for figuring out what your patrons think of certain things. Like, for example, I'm doing not safe for work illustrations on my Patreon for 3 years now, right? But I really wanted to do comics, but I wasn't sure that my patrons would be interested in it. I wasn't sure that if I changed to comics, will they be sad to see the full illustrations go? Would they not prefer that? So I made a poll and I was like, would you like to go continue with just the artworks? Or do you want to switch to comics? Or would you prefer to have one or two comic pages 1 month and then artwork the other month? And I just let them choose between it. And I do the same whenever I have any doubts about a reward or pricing or any plans that you have for the future. If you are not sure about it and you don't have a set opinion, you would be happy either way, then just ask your patrons to choose so you can make sure that you're doing the thing that would keep them happy.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
Um,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. You can take over.
Okay,
I
okay. Didn't
just
want to cut you off. So yeah. So yeah, a next point is just learn from other creators and creator-made resources. Other creators know the best how to do stuff. So there's a ton of stuff you can learn. And also, in general, look at how other people that are doing well on Patreon, look at what they're doing and try to research how they're doing it. Why does it work? You know? It's very
Yeah.
good to reference a bunch of different people. So, uh, hopefully this workshop was helpful for you, but even then, do go out and look at other patrons that are doing well, learn from the creators, and if they make resources, then try to listen to them, see what you can pick up that can apply to you. Also, for in terms of researching other patrons, use graphtreon.com. Madamka mentioned it a bit earlier in the workshop, but this is basically a website where you can go in and you can look at the statistics of other Patreons, and you can find them based on the genre they're in. So it's easier for you to find comic specific Patreons. You can see, for
A
example,
list.
a list based on like popularity, which are the most successful ones, yada yada yada. You can also, if you have a specific Patreon you would like to look at or your own Patreon, you can search it up and find it. Um,
Yeah.
and then the very last tip is don't expect instant success overnight. Even if you apply these tips that we gave you, it's not like you're going to do like one patron promotion or you reworked your page and then next morning you wake up and you have 500 new Patreons. It's
I mean, I
usually,
wish if that
yeah,
happens to you, oh my
yeah,
God,
that would be great.
good job.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, don't expect instant success overnight. This takes a long time, and that's okay. And it's okay. It's a learning process and it's a growing process, but it's not going to happen overnight. And you will grow a lot with it. You'll learn a lot of new strategies. Um, but don't be disappointed. Believe in yourself.
Yeah. And then all together, we really hope that this was helpful to all of you and it can help you figure out how to start up on Patreon or how to revamp it if you already have one. Um, and yeah, best of luck with it. And if you have any questions or something wasn't clear, this is your chance now to ask us about stuff. So go ahead, don't be shy. George wants 500 Patreons for Christmas. Wow, wow,
I
wow.
will
Okay.
bring you that.
Yeah,
I'll get it.
we will make a little like stick figure drawing of them. Absolutely. Luxie was asking any tips for if you need to take a break hiatus from your comic, what do you do with your Patreon then? In general, you have two options. You either pause your Patreon where people don't get charged, and they don't need to unsubscribe, and they will be charged automatically the next month when you come back, or you make an announcement about it. Like, I'm going on a hiatus soon with my comic, but my Patreon stays active. So, what I did is that months prior, I already brought it up with my patrons that we are getting close to a mid-season finale where I will take a break from publicly posting on webcomic platforms to figure out the second half of my season, but the Patreon will be running. And then when we got closer to the date, I made another post that was way more detailed where I told them exactly when I'm going on the hiatus from online posting. I still reassure them that the Patreon keeps on running. They will still get their monthly rewards. Obviously, they're not gonna get the early access because there's no episode to publish. But I told them that while I'm developing the second half of the season, I will share work in progresses with them, script snippets, outfit designs that I do, and just in general keep them in the loop. I want to get better at 3D backgrounds and incorporating them in my work. So I will share my progress with my patrons about that, tips and tricks, tutorials that I found and that I'm using, and just in general keep them in the loop. So these are your two options. Either you pause and not charge them, but also not give rewards, or let them know ahead of time that certain rewards are not going to be active, but the rest is. And then they can choose if they stay or not. Definitely, you have to expect when that happens that some people will leave because some people just aren't interested in development stuff, while you're on hiatus. But majority of them will stick around because they're interested and invested in your story and how it's developed.
Yeah, I have nothing to add.
What do you think if the Patreon? Oh, wait a second. I suddenly saw a bunch of tips, questions. Thank you, Twitch, for not loading them before. How long do you guys spend on Patreon per week? I can tell you that I spend about roughly 8 days in a month. And I count this by saying that my not safe for work art takes up at least 2 days, definitely, or three. And then I have an entire day when I'm scheduling for the work in progresses for the next episode. And I do that every 2 weeks because I have two episodes in a month. So that's 2 days already. So we're at four. And then, well, more like five. And then I have one day where I work on my not safe for work batches, not safe for work sketch batches. But that's only every like fourth month or something. So, and then there are like some extra time that I calculated in for like whenever I do extra Patreon posts on the go. Altogether, I think it's like 6 days a month, or like three per every 2 weeks, something like that.
uh, I yeah, I'm trying to think because I I don't have dedicated days to doing my scheduling for Patreon because I basically try to, like, for example, work in progress. I try to take work in progress shots as I'm just working on the episodes. And early access, I have a buffer, so I try to get, I draw the comic in traditional page format, so I just try to put it into scroll, and then um, every now and then, I think maybe every second month or something, I will sit down and I will schedule a couple episodes ahead. Um, schedule the work in progress. I kind of do my scheduling on Patreon as like an extra thing. If I have a day, which will happen during the month, when I have a day where my work, where I finish my work early, then I just spend the rest of the work time because we both work full time on our comics.
Yeah.
This is something to keep in mind as well. That this is like our full time job. So um, so when I have the comic work done for the day that I wanted to do, then I can sit down and I can do a bit of Patreon scheduling. Um, and then otherwise, in terms of like specific rewards, otherwise that are exclusive for Patreon, I do monthly art. Um, I spend about 3 days because I'm a little slow at drawing illustrations. So 2 or 3 days I will spend a month on doing that reward, and I kind of try to do it in a way where I don't have to sit down every single month to do more rewards. So this is why we were recommending a buffer that I will use one of my comic episode buffers, and then I will spend those 2 weeks on just building up a buffer for my illustrations, because then I don't have to spend 3 days of a month when I should be working on my comic episodes on doing another illustration. It saves you a lot of time in the long run. So yeah, I probably use around the same amount of days as Madamka, um, but it's just a little more sporadic because I don't have a set time for it.
Yeah. Butter was asking what are other examples of changes you're both making to your Patreons currently? Um, I'm revamping my entire Patreon. Like, I'm changing the tier names, the tier images, simplifying them. And I'm also reorganizing it because currently on my $2 tier, you have work in progress shots and HD panels. HD panels, they are one of those rewards where they were popular for a while, but then I saw that it's going down. So it's not worth the time anymore to spend on it. I could be spending that drawing the comic, you know? So I'm sunsetting that reward. So that leaves me with only work in progress in that tier. I also wanted to have early access for a long time now, so this was a perfect time to just add that into the $2 tier. And then my $5 tier used to be for not safe for work sketches and for what else did I have on it? HD uploads of my illustrations. And then my $10 tier was for the fully finished Not Safe for Work art, step by step progress shots, which I'm also sunsetting. I talked about it before, and for page format uploads of my comic. And when you look at it, it's kind of messy. I didn't like it. I would have preferred to have all of my Not Safe for Work stuff in one tier, but it didn't really work out because I didn't know how to price it. So now that I have a bit more experience, I decided to revamp the whole thing. The $2 tier is gonna be safe for work stuff, early access, and work in progress. And it's called Witch because that's what my comic is about. The $5 tier is gonna be called Demon because it's a bit more spicy, and that's gonna be where the not safe for work art lives, both the sketches and the comic pages or finished art illustration, whichever it is. But then the $10 tier, I didn't want to like betray my patrons who are already there. So I wanted to make sure that that tier is still really like full of rewards and it's worth it. So I decided to change it into an archive, a massive archive. I will put all of the past rewards, the HD panels and the step by step in the archive so it's available there. And also everything that I post in a month in the not safe for work content tier, I move it to the archive after 1 month. So the backlog is there. And to reflect these changes and to make sure that it's easy to understand what every tier stands for, that's why I'm making the name changes as well. So it's Witch, Demon, Archive. So it's easy to follow.
I am not. I'm not making that many changes to my Patreon because I pretty much like how it's running right now. So I think the only thing will be just like extra polishing when I have the time for it. I need to make a pinned post. Um,
Yeah.
I keep forgetting that I have to do it. So that's a thing on the list, and then adding in the tags in like to easy access in the welcome node. That's about it. Right now, my Patreon is paused because my comic is on a break for this month until December, and so my Patreon will resume posting in November because I do early access. So I think that's all the changes that I'm making. Honestly.
Dragon Whisper asks, how long did it take you to get your first Patreons? We actually have different approaches to this, so it's a good
Yeah.
question. I already had a Patreon when I started my comic, but I wasn't a known artist, you know? So I didn't have patrons. I just had it set up. So when I started Diamond Dive, I literally started from zero, you know? Like I didn't have a big following. Like most of my followers on Instagram were family members and friends, you know? So it actually like you can see it if you go to my episodes, if you read my comic, you can see it that on the first episodes there is no Patreon list at the end because I didn't have patrons. I already had my page set up, but no one pledged. It took me, I don't know, several episodes, and I only posted once a month back then. So that means it took me several months to get the first. But as soon as you get the first, then you can have a little like note there, for example, with a list if you want to shout out your patrons, and then people will join more and more and more as time goes on. This is what we meant when we told you all that like it's not, you shouldn't expect it to be a success overnight. It takes time, but it builds up and it's going to be okay. There's an audience out there for everyone, so you will definitely get patrons.
Yeah. The way. How long did it take me to get it? Um, okay, so I sort of have a time frame that I can tell you about, like sort of a little more specifically, but this will be very case by case basis for people. So when I ran my first comic, um, and I say first comic, but I did actually do like like a those type of daily gag comics. I
Mhm.
used to do one of those like years ago, but it didn't have a schedule, and I kind of didn't really like doing it in the end because I like making jokes, but I don't like making them like in that sort
On
of setup.
demand. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't like that format. Like I like reading it, but I don't like making it. So it stems from love is my first like story driven comic, and I put that out in 2019. So that's usually where I measure from, um, in terms of like how many years I've been doing comics. I've technically done it longer, but I just measure from 2019. So the comic started in that year, January, and then because I'm looking at the series right now because I know that I at some point I did set up a Patreon, but I didn't really know how I should like run it and like what should I put on it, and I feel a bit awkward showing it to people, and like I don't really know. So I did have it, but I did not promote it at all. Like it was like a tip jar Patreon. It had a $1 tier, and all it said on the Patreon was like, "Hi, this is my Patreon. If you want to give me a tip, then cool. Thank you so much." That's probably something like that. It was very bare bones, and and yeah, so I at the end of my episodes, the only promotion that I had, because it was my first comic, I didn't even really know how promotion worked. So I just had like a thank you for reading card, and then I had my Twitter and my Instagram, and then I had my Ko-fi, which I didn't use, by the way. So I did not mention my Patreon anywhere. I got a few Patreons still. I think I had like maybe 3, 4, something like that, because there is like a become a patron button at the bottom. So people like probably clicked on it just to see what was there. And then some really sweet people gave me like $1. But when I actually like did a proper revamp of the Patreon, um, and like actually put in rewards and stuff, it was very late in my comics run. Well, I say very late, but it's actually in the same year. But it's like 11 months later, 10 months later, something like that. That's when I actually revamped the Patreon. Um, and then actually told my readers that I have one. But the thing is that the comic itself ran for a year, like, and then it was done. So I was at like chapter 7, near the end of chapter 7, and the comic itself is like 9 chapters and a couple of epilogue comics. So you can tell that I was doing it late in the process, which is okay, because that was just what worked for me. So I already had a bigger readership at that point, which is probably also why I felt more comfortable starting to like promote my Patreon to them. This doesn't mean that you need to have like a gigantic readership, but that's just like I just wanted to have I wanted to get into the groove of making my comic first before I started thinking about doing additional work like a Patreon
Yeah.
on top of it. And so I ended up I got around I was probably around 46,000 or maybe 50,000 subscribers when I launched my Patreon. And so because of that, I also set a very small like starting goal so that I could push my Patreon again. So it was like $50. So I posted the Patreon launch on like I used to do this comic weekly, by the way. So I did it on the 5th of November, and then 2 episodes later, um, which is like 2 weeks later, then I had enough Patreons to meet the first $50 goal. So that's how quickly I got my first Patreons. And
Mm.
then from there, the next goal I think was like $100 or something like that,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
was a month later.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Basically, basically you can either have a Patreon from the get-go when you're still like literally starting out with 0 subs, like me, and then it can take several months to get the first person to subscribe. That's what happened to me. Or you can be like Soya, where you wait until you have a big enough readership that you're comfortable, that you can definitely launch a successful Patreon, because then it's very likely that that there's going to be at least a few people who are immediately um, interested when you launch it. So that's the two differences. George was asking, what do you think if the Patreon leads to further but ultimately unnecessary information of your world building as a possible reward? I mean, I think that lore snippets are very, very interesting. I think it's a good reward, but you have to keep in mind, in my opinion, that when you promote it, even if it's text on your Patreon, when you promote it as a reward on your Webtoon, it needs to be visual. So you have to have a visual panel for it as the teaser. Maybe a chart about something of your world, or like different weapons next to each other. And then you can have some type of text blurb next to it that, like, for more world building or lore or weapon types, this is just the example that I go with. You can find that on Patreon, you know? So I think there's definitely good ways of doing that. It's a good reward, but you have to be smart about how you're marketing it, because it's a bit harder, I think, to advertise it than a shiny new illustration.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that, especially for like um, maybe fantasy comics or any comic, honestly, that has like a different world, so it has world building in it. Um, I'm sure that there are readers that are very interested in learning more about the world.
Yes.
So it's just about figuring out the way that you can package that in the most interesting way, and then also so that people will be interested in going to read it. So yeah, definitely like go for it.
Yeah. Here's a question that's definitely specifically for you, Soya.
Hmm?
Any tips how to run a successful Patreon without not safe for work? I feel like many feel pressured to do not safe for work to get patrons. What safe for work rewards do you recommend that readers like?
Yeah, so I don't really do not safe for work. I would like to, but I don't have the time right now, unfortunately. I think that safe for work rewards can be, for example, the things that I do. Early access is a really good reward.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is only one episode ahead, by the way. I would like to, in the future, give them multiple episodes ahead, but right now I don't have enough buffer to confidently give them that. Um, but but yeah, I think early access is a very good reward, and work in progress, that's also safe for work. I would say the monthly illustration, because if people like your comic and they like the characters, why wouldn't they want to get extra art of them? If you enjoy doing it, because then you also get to do extra art of your characters. And if you're like me, I love drawing my characters. I mean, that's why I'm doing the comic in the first place. And so um, I would like to do like different illustrations with them, or like maybe some art that I could technically later on use for promo, but you have to wait quite a while for that. I think since it is an exclusive, but that one, honestly, my tier with the monthly illustration is my most popular tier. Um, and because yeah, people would like to get the extra art. And I also do bonus comics, which are also safe for work. They are usually just like 4 little snippets. You can also do like a side story if you would like. I think a very good other idea for like a safe for work um, reward is a Patreon exclusive comic. It can be a spin off, it can be a completely different comic than the main comic. But people, they are there for the main series first and foremost, but they might also be interested in, if they like your writing style, if they like how you do comics and how you do characters and the story, then they will be interested in if you're doing an exclusive comic on Patreon. um, HD panels can be a thing, but I'm probably also going to sunset that on my Patreon because it's not a very popular reward. So yeah, you can do it, but I don't really think you need to. It might be more interesting for your patrons to get what Madamka was talking about, where like I think you mentioned that you're going to be doing wallpapers instead, and this
Yeah.
is not, it's not wallpapers in the sense that she is drawing an entire new illustration. This is like you take panels from your comic that can be edited into like a fun wallpaper. It can
Yeah,
be a phone
exactly.
wallpaper, a PC wallpaper, stuff like that. So I also sometimes, not all the time, but I sometimes edit my illustrations into a PC wallpaper or a phone wallpaper. um, so those are just a few, and then PDFs. There are several Patreons that are safe for work. They're not like, it's not like it's easy, but in general, like I don't think that like building a Patreon is easy. So yeah, if you are not comfortable with drawing not safe for work, or you just don't have the time for it, then you can still like make it work.
And also, I would like to add, as a not safe for work artist, that I am adding early access to my Patreon because a safe for work reward that is related to the comic itself, that's like story driven, so you can read ahead, is a very stable reward. So, like, even though not safe for work art seems like an easy way to set up a Patreon, it's also notable that safe for work rewards take longer to build, but they are very stable. So if you have a Patreon that only has safe for work rewards, yeah, maybe it will take longer to get to the same level of support, but those people are definitely there for your story and they will stay. You can really see it on my Not Safe for Work tier that a lot of people are interested in it every month, but a lot of them also leave because they just want to look through the gallery and then they are out. Goodbye. But if you have early access, a story driven reward, then they will stay because they want to continue reading ahead. So, in conclusion, you can absolutely run a successful Patreon without Not Safe for Work. And you don't
Yeah.
have to do not safe for work if you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah,
I
seriously, don't
personally,
don't do that.
yeah. Like, I really enjoy working on it. I pride myself on my not safe for work art because I try to make it fit my characters and everything, you know. I try to make it really pretty and I'm happy working on it. But if I wasn't happy working on it, I wouldn't do it. And that's it. Um, Dragon Whisperer is asking, is it good to make not safe for work content for Patreon if I have an action adventure comic without romance and advertising it on Webtoons? Absolutely. Absolutely. Go for it. It's content that you are creating that's relevant to your comic in the sense that it involves your characters, and that's all you need. As long as you are clear about it in that case, that, like, if it's not canon, for example, whatever happens in your not safe for work art, then tell people that it's not canon. And that's it. It doesn't have to be a romance comic for you to have a valid reason for not safe for work art. Absolutely, go for it. Doesn't matter what genre you are in.
Yeah, honestly, as long as your characters are adults, then
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be romance.
Yeah. Absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's an action adventure comic. It's just relevant content, you know? It doesn't matter. So go for it, yeah. Luxie was asking, do you not feel sad doing pretty art you can't post on social media because it is for Patreon only? Um, Sometimes, yeah, but that's what teasers are for. And also, when you have a big enough backlog, you can start to use old Patreon rewards publicly. It's still your artwork. You have the right to use it later on, however you want to. Just leave an exclusivity window for your patrons that's generous, like at least half a year, so they feel like they paid for something that was actually just for them. Um, with Safe for Work artworks, if I do illustrations for Patreon, I will later on use it publicly as well. With Not Safe for Work, though, I will only show crops. I will never show the full thing on social media because, first of all, on most places I would get banned for it. Second, second, I don't need everyone to see it, you know? It's enough for me that people who are interested enough to pay for it will see it because the main thing that I want people, everyone to see is the comic. So that's how I think about it. How about you, Soya?
Yeah, I especially when I was just starting out with cuz I, I only do safe for work illustrations. So, when I was just starting out with doing them, I was like, "Oh man, I really wish I could like just post it for people, so they can see it because it's also just nice with like the validation or like you're excited for it, so you want to show it to people." But um yeah, like Madamka said, you can, after a while, you have to be patient, but after a while you can post like an illustration that was earlier and a Patreon exclusive, but you just have to like make sure that, like she said, wait half a year. I'm very paranoid, so I usually wait an entire year, and I don't really post that many of my safe for work illustrations. Like I have for Pride Month, I did a Pride piece. Like I think it's a year old now, maybe 2 years. And then I posted the very old Pride piece that I did, and I was like, "Happy Pride Month," you know. And then I told people that this is actually an illustration that I did for my Patreon. So if you like this one, then imagine what the one for this month is gonna look like, because it's cute. Um, so yeah, I do get to, like, just like Madamka, you get to show a preview, so you still get to show people that it's like some cute art you did. Um, but yeah, you have to stay strong and not show them. You can't post every single thing that you make on your Patreon because then it's not exclusive anymore.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Poopy Lord, fun name, was asking, was Patreon what enabled you to go full time with your comics, or was it more through other venues that you secured a stable enough income? Do you want to start, Soya?
Sure. So 2 seconds. Sorry, my microphone is falling down. I'm sorry if you can hear like or something, because
No, it's all right.
it's my microphone being dumb. um, wait, what was the question again? Was Patreon what enabled you to go full time?
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, it was kind of a mix, I think, because I think just like don't put all your eggs in one basket should apply to promoting your Patreon. I don't think that you should only have one income source. So right now, my main income source is from Patreon. It definitely is what helps me do this full time. I think the same is for Madamka, but she will answer that for herself. But also uh, from Webtoon, for example, they do have an ad revenue program and beta creator credit, um, and those might not be forever. I don't really know, but for right now they are an okay side income, but they are not enough. Like ad revenue, it is never enough to make a full-time living on, and you should never expect that.
Mm,
Like it's not like I make gigantic bank on ad money, but it is like it is like okay in this sense of like if you
yeah.
have a
It
month
adds
where
up.
yeah, it adds up. If you have a month where you get $100 in ad revenue, then that's nice, of course, but it's not enough to pay your rent. Um, so so yeah, Patreon is definitely like the main thing. I would like to print my comic in the future, do like a Kickstarter, so then I will end up having an online store for the printed books and so on. So I definitely think that it's good to slowly build multiple income sources. You don't need 50 million different income sources, but it's good to have more than one. So that if one of the websites uh, break down and just fall over and just stop working, then you still have other income sources that you can keep you afloat until you get that like back up.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. For me, it was a mix of everything. When I started out my comic, I worked full time as a store manager. And that was a pretty chill store. So I was able to work on my comic in my breaks, or if the store wasn't busy, because my boss just trusted me that I will not neglect my job. So, first of all, that helped me time wise to start going full time slowly from part time, you know? Um, and then while I was doing a full time job next to it, I started doing my comic. And then I started to get a little bit of money from ad revenue when I reached that milestone, when I unlocked it on Webtoon, in their program. And then creator credit when that became available and I had enough stats to get something. And then when I started doing Patreon, that definitely helped me a lot. But actually, I was kind of in a weird spot because the thing that mainly helped me go full time was COVID, funny enough, because I was living in England at the time, and the government had this like system that because we were not allowed to go to work, you were asked to stay home, but you still got 80% of your monthly wage that's in your contract. So that meant that suddenly, from working on my comic on my breaks at work and in the weekend, if I had the weekend off, suddenly I was able to work on it full force, full time, and I didn't have to worry about my rent because the government still gave me my monthly wage, like 80% of it. And that led to me being able to switch to updating twice a month. And that led to growth on my comic. And I had time to post more on Patreon, which then generated altogether a bigger interest in my Patreon. And then that income was finally what allowed me to say to my boss that I'm not going back to my job. So, yeah, the short answer is that, yeah, it was Patreon that enabled me to go full time, but there's more to it. So, in general, I would just advise to be smart about it and take slow and steady steps towards transitioning into full time. Don't just leave your work when you have zero income and just hope that you will make it.
Yeah.
Like, I started to slowly build up my Patreon next to working full time and then left it like a year after.
Yeah, for my situation, like, I won't go too much into it, but like, I have a very supportive family that like genuinely really wanted to, like, especially my dad really wanted to help support me in doing art full time. So I started with a comic when I was like, or like this type of work when I was younger. So I had, like, I was living at home, so I didn't have to pay for rent and worry about stuff like that. And that's also like the thing that like this um this journey will be different for everyone because everyone's situation is different. So I poured like all of my time into doing my comic and trying to do my best and work on it, but not everyone has that same amount of time or the same amount of support. And I understand that like it was a very like privileged position in that sense that I was in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's also best that like even if the main chunk of your income is from Patreon, still go and look at other platforms where you can monetize, because even if it's just $10 that you get from a different platform every month, it's $10 more, you know? And if there's another platform where you can get 100, then it's 110 plus your
Yeah.
Patreon, you know? This is what we meant when we were saying don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Try to get several income sources if you can, and build all of them as much as you can
Yeah.
with a healthy and organized schedule
Yeah.
without ruining your health.
Yeah, because like there also has to be a point where you have to think about like, okay, sure, there is like you shouldn't spread yourself thin, you know. You can run a Patreon and your comic, maybe make a bit of ad revenue there, because you're already posting the comic anyways, so it's not like you're putting extra effort into that income, in that sense. And you can like have like an online store if you have the time for it, and or do a Kickstarter. But like I don't think that you should um, have like several, like five other sites where you make maybe like $5 every blue moon, but you still put a bunch of work into it, because that's not healthy for you and it's not worth the time, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
there are certain sites where it takes a long time, like for example Patreon, to get the build up enough. But it's not like every single site that can make you a tiny bit of money is worth it. So pick your battles, see what you can really sink your work into, don't put all your eggs in one basket, but also don't spread yourself thin. You don't have to have like 30 different income sources.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quality over quantity.
Yep, absolutely. I think that was most of it. We have one more question, and then we will wrap it up. That's Dragon Whisper asking, did you struggle with sub drops on Webtoons in the beginning, and was there a time where you felt discouraged to continue with it? Um, I like. I'm really glad you asked this. We both struggle with feeling discouraged to this day. Numbers mean nothing when it comes to imposter syndrome and feeling like you're not doing enough or you're not good enough. We are both the type of people that we like very strongly believe in our career and in our comics, but that doesn't mean that we are immune to feeling like we're
Discouraged.
maybe not, yeah, like we're not immune to feeling low, you know.
Yeah.
um sub drops are very normal, and it's not just in the beginning, it's all the time. Every time I post a new episode, I lose subscribers. And that's because there are a bunch of people, especially if your comic is running for a long time, that just subscribe to it because they're interested, but they didn't have the time to actually read it, and they forget about it. And then the next time you update, they get a notification and they're like, what is this comic? I don't think I'm that interested in it. And they unsub. It happens more than you would think. It's not personal. It's just that your comic is not for them. You're not gonna be everyone's favorite. You have to let that go. So when you see people unsubbing, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It's natural. It happens to all of us. But the thing is that even if you're losing subs, they will like be replaced with people who actually want to stay. So whenever I see right after an update that my sub count is going down, it's okay because a few days later or a few weeks later, it's going to be actually higher than it was before they left. It's okay.
Yeah.
So,
I have not been discouraged about sub drops specifically, but like Madamka said, there are other things that your brain can make up that you can worry
yeah,
about. So don't worry
yeah,
about that one.
a whole plethora.
So, but yeah, in terms and the reason why it's not because like oh I never lose subs. It's actually because I just try my best to not look at my subscriber count. I don't look at like and I have always done this by the way. Like even when I started out, when I just started out posting, I think for the first week I kept like a little log of like oh a day have passed and I got this many subscribers, because I was like excited about it. But after that point, I put a hard stop for myself. Like okay, but I'm not going to track it any further because then I know that it will stop being healthy for me and then it will start becoming an obsession.
Yeah,
So I don't look at my subscriber number. I know like approximately what it is, and that's kind of how I've always been about it, that like I approximately know what it is, but I would strongly advise to like don't really keep an eye on it because yeah, you will lose subscribers every time you update and then you will gain new ones. I don't know how many I lose cuz I don't really want to know. But I definitely do lose some, and then I gain some new ones. So it's like when you get past 1,000 subscribers, you get a like an automated email from Webtoon Canvas that you got another 1,000 subscribers. Every time you tick up by 1,000, you get a new email. So that's the only way now that I sort of know how many subscribers I have, because otherwise I just live in ignorance.
blissful
Yeah,
ignorance. Yeah,
that's my
yeah.
honestly, that's my biggest tip. Just don't hyper focus on it.
Yeah. Try to stay away from the numbers too much. Of
Yeah.
course, it's our job and it's our livelihood, so we have to look at the numbers, but it's not healthy to look at it all the time and to keep a tab on how much you lose or gain, because what you should be focusing on is putting your story out there and be consistent and be reliable in the sense that you let people know that this is something you want to work on and you're gonna finish it.
Yeah.
And if you do that, sooner or later, you will get the reward that you are expecting to get, you
Yeah.
know?
Consistency is key, definitely.
Yes, yes. And that's kind of how I would like to close down this, that like just like it is on with Webtoon, it's the same on Patreon. It's not a get rich quick scheme. You have to be patient and you have to have faith in yourself and do your best to promote yourself in a healthy way. And hopefully, the tips that we shared with you today can help you with that.
Yeah, you can do it. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and hopefully this helped. And have a great evening, day, where whatever it time it is at your place.